3, 2, 1. We are now live. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest on Atheist Edge today. Leaning in, Alix Jules. And
everyone point. You got a point. There we go. Okay.
Back on the show is TJ, Britt, and Courtney. We're going to do a 4-person roundtable talk. I have no idea what we're going to talk about, and we're just going to bring up some interesting topics. Go for it.
TJ, why do you hate black people?
I didn't know I did.
You're sitting in that chair. You're sitting in that chair.
I'm in that chair.
You're in that chair. You're in that chair.
The opposition chair.
The opposition chair. Oh. Totally on the spot now. I can't do that.
Oh man.
Yeah, I didn't know I did. If I do, and it's not warranted, then yeah, by all means, I should change the way I think about things.
Okay, good. You're an SJW now. So now you. So, when did you choose your lifestyle?
When did I choose it? Well, it's 1998.
Oh, are you really that young?
What?
1998?
No.
Okay.
I was born in 84.
Okay.
So yes, she's young.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, you're the baby.
Oh shit.
When did I choose my lifestyle? Yeah, I mean that can go for the atheism or homosexuality. No, I mean like that's the argument that people bring up.
Yeah.
Do you think you get to choose what you believe though?
No,
If it's a choice.
Right. Okay.
No, I didn't choose to be an atheist. There's
You didn't-
no.
yeah.
Oh no, are you kidding? It's one of those. It's and I hate drawing the analogy because it's completely different.
Well,
But when it would be very difficult for an African American to choose to be an atheist because it is social suicide. What winds up happening is the same type of apostasy without having the edict of having a fatwa put on your head. You're completely exercised out of the black community. Now it's changed over the years. When I came out, it's funny. I got onto the Ebony magazine, the big spread back in 2000.
First Black Atheist featured in the magazine.
Yeah, exactly. First time they ever addressed the issue, period, the topic. And then it wound up being the first time that it's been addressed by atheists. And I think the circulation was over a million readers a month, which was kind of a big deal, whether it's black or white. And it was kind of a big deal. And the whole reason I got that is because they hadn't found any other African-American atheists that would talk about it or were vocal about it.
Yeah.
And it's not that they weren't there. It's just that nobody was getting any
atheist
business.
Community is different than the atheist demographic.
Absolutely. 100% agreed. 100%.
What year was that?
That was 2011. It was 2011.
Oh wow, that seems so much later than I thought.
Yeah, it was 2011.
Wow.
There are
And,
probably a lot more atheists that are a part of the movement. I've seen closet. You can just walk down the street and probably talk to half a dozen closet atheists if you're just walking down a busy street.
well, the question is, do you think that they actually are atheist, or they don't know that they're atheists?
Or
because
they're people that just never thought much about religion.
I find that most Christians don't actually believe what they say they believe, right? I mean, that's a given. Most believers in general,
They were told to believe it. That's how they get new ideas in, is whoever tells them the thing to believe.
You believe you're chosen and you're protected, but
Right.
you will you'll look twice before you cross the
Oh,
road.
there's no doubt.
Or there's like entire topics about it that people have never even considered. Things like original sin, or things like original sin being tied so closely to Adam and Eve, and that sort of being in question because of certain scientific things. Like there's certain medical and scientific advances that really call into question these things, but people don't realize that they do, or how deeply they do, unless they're more in the atheistic community where you're kind of talking about these topics in a much more intellectual way.
I want to go back to something that you said, which is the atheist community, or what I call the secular movement, being very different than the actual atheist demographic, because that's something that I've argued for years. In fact, I think what you get is a very skewed sample size when we take a look at what we call the
We know nuns, but it's I don't.
We know nuns, but this is where I think you have a much greater representation of what America is in the demographic versus the movement. We don't have real representation. So right now we see a big wave of white nationalism that is across the United States in general. In general, we see it. How prominent it is debatable. It is definitely visible now.
Right, but it's one of those things. It's like I don't even know where these people are. Like
I do.
I've never even like ran into something
really
like this.
Really, I run into them all the time. I run into all the time.
No, I mean I know it's there. Like it exists.
Dude, not only do they exist, I found, and this is not to go off on the atheist community, but because of some of the intellect that's associated with that, I am finding that the alt-right movement happens to, we have an alt-right atheist demographic, which was like, where did that come from? But it's kind of sort of been there.
Atheism isn't an ism per se. It's not an ideology. It's a single position on one specific.
It's a description. Topic. It's a descriptor of
it. It's an identification, definitely.
Yeah.
People are atheists for non-skeptical reasons all the time.
That's true.
For non-skeptical reasons, I thought we all got there through
I know. Like
intellectual.
My IQ jumped up like 20 points when I became an atheist.
That's like direct from Dogma Debate.
It's not true at all.
Not
obviously, right? Because
you learn real fast. That's untrue when you join the movement. It's
right. Yeah.
Why is that? Wait. Because I made the statement back in 2008, 2009 that sometimes coming out in the atheist movement, it's really caustic to your skin, especially if you're Black, right? Because it's not something. So we went through this phase of being invisible, tokenized, to being shunned.
Either. I mean,
well, there's no good answer there.
Right?
Well, and then we had this wonderful fallacy. I used to see it with some of the big organizations that would tout, how diverse we were. I was like, that 95% is at the time 95% was still one demographic, and so all you're doing here is showing these occasional extreme cases of atheism and diversity that really don't talk about inclusion, and creating an inclusive atmosphere or environment is very different than just showing off your diversity. That's just tokenism.
Can you like define the difference between what you were saying of the demographic and the actual community? I think I'm not quite sure what you're.
So when we, Darryl Ray used to talk about this years ago, and I remember having this conversation when he came down to Texas, where the joiners, the people that are actually part of the secular community, we're talking about maybe the 5%, maybe the 1% of the people that are atheists, that will read atheist blogs, that will watch atheist podcasts, etc. And even when you take a look at some of the celebrities, etc., that's still a very small number in terms of how many atheists actually exist. I mean, Patheos is the largest atheist blogging network out there. I happen to be on that and The Orbit, and they don't have any. They don't even make a dent in the number of atheists that actually exist out there. I argue that percent, if not more, of atheists care about atheism or theology until their own personal rights are in jeopardy. Separation of church and state wind up being an issue when it's an issue when it's locally.
Community.
Or I think
absolutely.
Anyway. They try to say this is the only place you can go in your town or in your community, and we can welcome you and we can provide you with that sense of community and belonging with people. Just us.
Okay, but the reality, it would be great. It would be great if we could do that, but we failed. We failed doing that. And so what we had once upon a time is this intellectual stronghold that said, if you're smart, if you are smart in academia, because this is where a lot of the atheist movement kind of flourished once upon a time ago, was in the universities. Free thought this, critical thinkers that, blah, blah, blah. This is what's going to set you free. And then it changed. It's no longer that, because I think a lot of the movement figured out that there are different ways and different paths to free thought.
Mm.
Well, I've heard also too that like when like as far as like ritual goes, that goes a long way towards making people stay loyal to an institution.
It worked with Christianity.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like because you invest a part of yourself, your being, your worth, your earnings, whatever it is, into this ritual, it makes you more likely to seem to the group that you're going to remain loyal to that group.
Yeah.
And it's like, look how far I'm willing to go to be one of the team. You know, it's like, well, we don't really have anything like that in the secular community.
Well, no,
much. I mean, but,
no, we don't. And what we're finding is the defining lines are being exasperated. They're being and I call them defining lines versus the dividing lines, because a lot of people will talk about the divisiveness that exists here or there, where I would say that those aren't necessarily areas of division. It's how we define ourselves and cohere our identities in general. So when we start talking about African American issues, if you're a Black atheist, or if you're a trans person and you happen to be an atheist, and the intersection of these other issues, well, they impact your life. And when we talk about how secularism impacts your life, most people, when it comes to any kind of theology or ideology, it's always going to be about themselves. There's no demand or compulsion, to make it about anything else.
That's
right. Which is also one of the reasons why it's so difficult to get rid of things like sexism or racism, because at the root of it is not intelligence. It's not about more education. It's about self-interest.
Aspect is the whole self-interest thing. But psychology background person.
Yeah.
This is something that I've noticed.
You're probably much, he's much higher in that rank.
So
yeah.
Something else that I've noticed in the atheist community is, especially if somebody comes from a background of being like with a religious family, especially like a hardcore Christian family, or even very like Muslim or anything, like anybody who's been raised in a very strict religious household, and then they realize that they're atheists, and it seems like they might somewhat gain trust issues. Like they end up seeing people as quickly, and therefore you don't have that bonding happen so quickly that you might, like if you had been a lot quicker to trust people that you first meet. I don't know, like it's
okay, but
I just thought of that.
But part of that tends to be age and your psychological development. So when you start looking at how people trust or develop their trust and their bonds, even Richard Dawkins talked about it. It's really easy to indoctrinate children, really because they're at the ages where they have a predisposition to trust, the authority.
Well, it's easier to get kids, but I'm talking about when people happen to go through that transition, especially if it was traumatic in any way, and then they want to be an activist. Maybe they're in their angry phase still of being an atheist, and some people never leave the angry phase.
Well, it depends on what you're angry about.
Yeah, but you were talking about common values across the board, or even people being able to relate to one another instead of just like being concerned about themselves. I mean, it's hard to kind of get over that, and
it's biologically rooted. I mean, it's kind of hard to get over that when it's very difficult to.
Yeah, but it seems like it's exacerbated a little bit, like when they were raised and indoctrinated basically in a particular religion.
Do you mean the difference between people's involvement of being interested in voting a certain way and actually getting into a movement about it?
Yeah, like being a part of a community and trusting other people and forming relationships, like healthy relationships with others. And
I just remember certain
tricky.
things,
I mean,
like certain things being voted on, like or gay marriage stuff, was a lot of people were galvanizing around that, even if it didn't directly affect them. Logically, it was a clear issue that was right in their mind, and people sort of galvanized around that, I think.
Yeah.
Especially if you weren't part of that community at all, it was still really exciting to have that happening and to have to see it go the way that it did. But so I'm not sure that it would be that it's always a personal issue that has to drive you to be involved. But maybe if you were to look at the amount of people who only voted a certain way instead of actually getting involved in that campaign and trying to affect it positively, that might be the difference that you're talking about.
Is that why you voted for Trump? I'm truly messing with you. I'm truly messing with you. Yeah.
Oh wow.
I do actually have a manga hat in my house.
But just for laughs.
But you went to a rally.
I went to a rally.
No,
I absolutely. I went to a rally.
Alex went to a Trump rally.
I went to a
That's
Trump
what we're
rally,
referring to.
and I got the Trump sign. I got a manga hat. And I am still, I don't know how to get off the mailing list, but every few days I get an email from the administration. It's always fundraising, right? And it's actually,
he's already got his re-election campaign.
So
Yeah.
the funniest thing, right, was I got an email from Mike Pence, right? And it says Mike Pence, and it said in your neighborhood, and I'm reading this, right, and I'm thinking, who are the racists in your neighborhood? In your neighborhood. That's all I can sing, right? I'm like, it's terrible, Mr. Rogers, but right, who are the racists in
He was
your
a
neighborhood?
Presbyterian minister, by the way, who never mentioned religion or God at all, ever.
Until-
in his like 20-something odd year like kid show or whatever.
Until.
Wow.
Yeah, it was great. It was wonderful. Emails, and no matter how many times I hit unsubscribe, I still get that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did that affect your online kind of echo chamber, I guess?
Did that get you by any bot? Did anybody's bot get you because of that?
What did you learn?
Yeah.
What did I learn?
Or what came your way?
I'm still getting it.
Yeah.
I'm still getting it. I experienced because I originally thought, and I think I wrote about it. I originally thought I was buying into the image of the Trump supporter that the media was selling us.
There's a stereotypical Trump supporter out there.
Yeah.
now.
Well, they still may represent, the typical Trump
Probably
supporter.
some out there, man.
But when I went to the rally, what I saw, and I had Dr. Zachary Moore went with me. It's a funny story because I was on another podcast and I was joking around about. And someone said, would it be okay if white people had white men had safe spaces? And I said, well, what do you call Congress? And then and then they said, that's not fair. That's not fair. I said, okay, a Trump rally. And to that response, I got, well, you've never been. And so I'm like, well, that's true. I've never been to a Trump rally, so let me go. And so I really thought about it, and even it was crazy because even some of my conservative friends, and I still have conservative friends, they saw I posted this on social media, and they were begging me, don't go, please don't go. And I said, I'm gonna go, and nobody wanted to go with me. It's like, it's not gonna be safe. We're not going, you're on your own, right? And then Zach reached out to me and he said, I'm not gonna let you do this by yourself. There's just no way. I have to go with you. I'm like, okay. Now Zach is much larger than I am, towering. Zach Moore.
Zach Moore.
Yeah.
Okay.
Moore, yeah.
Yeah, he's got like a foot on me or something like that. Almost.
Yeah, he's a big guy.
He's a big guy, and
Yeah.
he's a little bit bigger than as well as last February. And he shows up and he's wearing an American flag as a cape.
He went all out.
He went all out. Cowboy boots, cowboy hat, shades, and he was Captain America. And he walks up to me and I'm like, the first 30 seconds, he doesn't even acknowledge me. I'm like, he's in the character. And I've got my camera and I've got my press pass with me. And I'm like, these are going to protect me because if someone really does step to me, then I'm like, I got you on film, right. And many of the observers immediately did think that I was with the press, and I had my credentials with me at the time. But they're like, okay, so we obviously won't mess with you because we'll make it on the 6 o'clock news.
If they do anything.
So yeah, totally.
But wasn't that kind of part of that group anyway, like wanting to?
Well, to control the narrative,
maybe,
but not to do something
not
that's
really
out of
it's like not really caring about what's perceived as violent or not. You know what I mean? Like there was kind of an open rhetoric that did get on camera of people
very much so
shouting things and getting angry at people and inciting actual violence.
There were I saw an exchange between he was either a doctor or a surgeon, not a vet, a doctor or surgeon.
I like your face.
And he's talking to, I think she must have been 16 or 17-year-old Latino girl. And she's there and she's protesting, very quietly with a couple of her friends, which was her right. She's there, whatever. And he is shouting her down and tearing her down. And he didn't say that. He didn't say that. I'm like, a little kid. She's literally quoting word for word. She printed it out and she's like showing, man, what he said. Wow. That's not what he meant. I'm like, yeah, this is absolutely a metaphor for America. And I went out there and I didn't feel unsafe for the majority of the time there. Outside, I'm there and I'm seeing these people interact. And I look at Zach and I said, you see the homogeneity here, right? I was like, yes. It's like, this is a cross sample of the majority. If the majority decided, and I mean, we talk about demographics, African Americans only make up 13% of the entire population, 13%. And of that 13%, like 1% of that 13% has any real influence financially. And then when we talk about politically,
like 200 years behind as far as the
in terms of but you would expect that with America's zoning laws.
Starts out different. I mean, started at the very bottom. I mean,
right, exactly. I mean, and the equity hasn't caught up yet. Right. I mean, that I think we all can agree that equity has not caught up there. I mean, a lot
of people are.
My mom tells me stories because she grew up in New York. My mom tells me that she actually came from the West Indies, and she came here in the 60s. And she tells me she bought a little brownstone in Brooklyn. Investment, by the way. But she talks about trying to get into some of the areas and suburbs and not being able to, even in the 70s and early 80s, being able to buy, even if she said, I'm close to buying the house outright, and they will not let me. It wasn't a money thing, it was a race thing. They wouldn't let her buy the house. It's called redlining. Redlining.
So like, so somebody actually came to this woman and said, no,
yeah,
you
exactly.
can't buy this house it's because of XYZ.
Not a cultural fit. Not a cultural fit. Not a cultural fit. Soon. Right?
Yeah.
That's the answer, not a
cultural fit.
Well,
the housing authorities, etc. I mean, come on, you have a president with a background that shows discrimination in housing. I mean, come on.
His move for maybe that was his thinking on the neurosurgeon. The pyramids
Ben Carson?
The pyramids are just as grain storehouses. I mean, come on, man. That's your people, man.
What do you have to say about that?
About Ben Carson?
Or are you going to say that's not my people?
Ben Carson's an interesting individual. He's an interesting individual. And I'm not sure that there's no pathology there and I'm not diagnosing.
No, it's the pathology is rational self-interest, I think, on his part.
Absolutely. But I mean, even if you talk about, some of the things that he puts out in his autobiography about where he was mentally when he was younger, I'm like, there's other stuff there that, I mean, that's.
Yeah.
He did not have a typical.
Well, he knows he's talking to the 40% of the population that believes like angels are real, though. You know what? He knows that. And he knows that.
True.
You know what I'm saying?
But he might also believe it.
And he might also.
I think he does. I think he does.
So it's only
I think he
advantageous
does.
for him to talk about those things, because not only does he get the self-satisfaction of saying a thing he already believes in, but he gets the satisfaction of
Validation.
that, yeah, he gets the validation of hundreds of thousands of others, where he can just be like, yeah, see, I'm right.
So back to the Trump rally thing.
Yes.
Were you the one who you ended up talking to some of the vendors outside?
I totally did.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
talked to everyone who would talk to me. I was like, some of them would let me film, some would let me do audio. The vendors, many of there were African American vendors out front.
Yeah.
And I would walk up to them and like, so tell me about your support. Like, I don't support it. Come on, man. It's like, I'm here trying to make some money. I got to eat. And then what was really funny was there was a guy that was selling trumpets out front. He happened to be white. And I'm like, okay, so you, I mean, I went ahead and made the assumption, like, so you support Trump? It's like, no, I'm voting for Hillary. And I'm like, oh my God, are you serious? It's like, yes, but I mean, these trumpets are brilliant, right? I'm like, yeah, you know, so you exist in the context of an American capitalistic narrative. That is the context. So you have to survive it.
I happen to like capitalism. I don't know. I mean, it's worked pretty good for us.
It is what it is.
It's not laissez-faire. I mean, it's honest, it's not it's not free for all.
We got a comment. In the 70s in Ontario, Canada, a petition went around my neighborhood to prevent a man from selling his house to a black family. My dad tore it up and threw it into the petitioner's face. There were already tons of signatures on it, bro. Yeah.
Comment. I mean, when we talk about the in America, I don't know if you're familiar with the Green Books. All right, so this was, I want to say it was the 20s and 30s. There was the Green Books that were put out by postmasters, and they're still relevant today. I've been trying to get them. I continue to petition. We need to update the Green Books and put them out there. The Green Books were put out by postmasters that would tell you where it was not safe American to actually travel. Like when I went to, it was great then. It's still relevant now. I think
it's clearly drawn where all those places are now, though, isn't it?
I thought it was until I went to Kansas. Right, I went to, was it Kansas? And I was giving a talk in Kansas, and someone said, "Don't go too far north." I'm like, "What? Why?"
Road or
it's like exactly, because it's like you're going to Fort so and so.
So they just like don't go any farther.
And this was white organizers, and it's like, hey, you want to stay down here and blah blah blah. I'm like, okay, hold on. And my response was, why?
Yeah.
It's like, well, if you go too far north, if you go right, why? Right. Like if you go too far north, right? White Pride Radio is still on air.
Oh,
so you don't want to stop. They're broadcasting. Exactly.
They let you know.
Oh yes, they told me. They said, what it is. And they told me, they said, if you tune into this station, don't be surprised if you. I'm like, don't be surprised if you hear.
No, I'm gonna totally be surprised, dude.
White Pride Radio, and I'm like, okay, so do not go.
What's also scary about that, like radio echo chamber in like our part of Texas as well.
Yes,
is no matter if you look at like the talk radio station. I've been hearing this lately. I don't listen to that, but I've been hearing this like feedback that there's really like nobody that that can find anything other than that type of political rhetoric. Yeah. Maybe not that extreme, but something similar. And that's what's really scary is this idea of like local is usually really conservative and really skewed and it's really scary because it creates that public opinion in this area.
And it reinforces itself, and it continues to reinforce.
And so what's scary about that is that if that's something that's like
me,
accepted and gets good ratings in that area.
No, I wish. So this is what I thought was the case. I wanted to believe that was true, but when I saw at the Trump rally was that most people are not like you. They are not looking for dismissing dismissing that. This is extreme. This is extreme. And then when we go out and actually test, do surveys, and study it, it turns out that no, you're actually it's a simple minority, but you're in the minority. The majority of America is a little bit more racist than that. I'm talking about both implicit and explicit bias. It's just like I used to believe before I would joke around and say Americans are racist that they're going to elect Trump. I didn't really believe it. I just said it, right? And then it turns out, and I said, the whole argument about being too PC and blah blah blah. I said I totally get that, and I can understand why that hypothesis could easily be validated. Blah blah blah. And then we went back and studied
There's
it.
a lot of people that say Trump is a result of.
But that's not true. It turns out that we've studied it extensively, at least with 3 large studies. I'm talking about 10,000 plus N samples, close to 100,000 varied N samples. Harvard. Harvard is taking a look at it. Yale is taking a look at it. Stanford's taking a look at it. Absolutely. All you got. And see, this is why I'm like, if you are interested in it, Google is your friend. In fact, I'd say Google Scholar specifically. If you use Google Scholar, if you're interested in why people are actually voted, we were actually able to figure out.
I was going to point something out about Google. Go ahead. Google's actually pretty biased.
Google by itself.
Like your own Google browser.
Right.
I think it's incognito.
Right. Yeah. So what you're looking for is Google Scholar specifically. Okay. So which is I know.
Google Scholar.
Yeah. Scholar. I think it's scholar.google.com. Yeah. Or use any kind of academic search engine that you have. Google Scholar happens to be one of them. It's AI based on what your browsing history is. Yeah. You're looking specifically for literature that has been peer reviewed. You can set, years, et cetera, and various context parameters. It's right there.
No, but a lot of people don't know that about Google specifically, that it's very biased to their own search history.
People don't know that?
No, they don't. Well, not
really?
At least maybe the older generations.
No, I know they
like my parents can't tell the difference between an advertisement and an article.
Correct.
And I know that's been studied with young people as well.
Correct.
But they can't tell the difference when they click on something that it's going to send them to another link and they just don't know.
Yeah, and imagine what happens. And I think Facebook has been messing with it, and so is Google. What do you do when you can actually see what is promoted as an advertiser sponsored link? They're toying with the idea of removing that highlight.
That's really
So
scary.
you can't
That's
tell
terrifying.
if it's an ad or not?
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, because America likes fake news. America likes fake news that makes them feel good about themselves, which is what we tend to find in most echo chambers, especially in the atheist community.
Yeah,
it's confirmation bias.
Yeah,
it's human.
Yeah.
I was going to bring that up about this, how much of that like Trump rally community is they think the way that they do based on the reality that they live in their echo chamber. Like they have no idea what you or I get out of the internet and what comes our way, and we have no idea what comes their way. So it's really surprising to me. Get out of that echo chamber a little bit and you start to look up certain things.
I'm interested in looking it up though.
Well, just something I did. I know Brits explored this too. But when you get out of that, you really start to see just a little bit of what they are hearing. And it is astounding. It's really scary.
It is. I call it the Fox effect, where we get into the whole 55% of white Americans believe that they're discriminated against by it.
I have heard that.
Right. Well, it's an interesting.
Against, but not because I'm a white male, but because I'm an atheist.
Oh, well, that's different. That's that's different. We're talking about based on race.
I don't have any like delusions that I'm somehow like not given a fair shake in society. I don't have any of those kind of feelings towards other human beings. I can't like pretend to imagine what it's like for someone who actually does experience those kinds of setbacks in their life. And I don't, you know, I try to, so that way I'm not being dishonest or disingenuous when I say, hey, about the thing that you're talking about, let's honestly talk about it. I can't like pretend that I know how you feel. I can't. But I can still have the conversation. Be like, what do we do?
No, I agree. You can have the conversation, but one of the problems that I tend to find with people in general, I don't think everyone should be talking about race. Specifically, I don't think everyone should be talking about race when it comes to it outside of being opinion, right? You can have an opinion, etc. But what I find to be very discouraging when it comes to discussing race is I had to learn one set of history that we all had to learn, right? We all had to learn that, and that is white American history or American history, which is, as we know, slightly biased. In fact, we have in Texas, where we have examples in Texas, in Florida, Mississippi, Alabama, and the South in general, the old Confederacy, where I said old Confederacy, don't blow up my inbox, where we see that there's been a whitewashing of history, where we don't want to call it slavery, we want to call it an involuntary migration or stuff like that.
Like the Trail of Tears.
The idea of something like that seriously.
No, well, talk about your textbooks. Talk about Texas.
The textbook I learned
Texas.
from said slavery.
Now they're trying to change it. They're trying to change it.
The writers of, especially
we're talking about Texas. We're talking about Texas specifically.
People from trying to do shit like that.
We try to stop it, but
the majority of
but that's what Macmillan. No. But that's what wound up happening. I don't want to. I want to say I think it was Macmillan that published it. I might be wrong, but there was went out there and they called it involuntary migration, and then an involuntary migration, not slavery. And then because of social media, she was able to blow it completely up. And yes, it got changed, and they said, oh, it was an accident and blah, blah, blah. But when you take a look at the Texas tax, the actual standard and what we've been trying to do with changing, come on, you want Moses to be considered
it's known by most scholars is to be an amalgam of actually 3 different characters.
Doesn't matter.
From pre-biblical
Doesn't
texts.
matter.
And he was not really a real guy.
He is a founding father
of
America, right?
Oh, I mean, okay. You're saying that these people are saying that.
Right,
like,
right. This is what they were really pushing. They were really pushing for that.
Wait,
this is theocratic. So
I haven't heard that one.
Oh yeah.
This is probably
Moses?
theocratic in nature than anything.
She needs a minute.
I'm having a little freak out here. Moses
was a founding father.
The biblical. Oh my gosh.
Okay. Look with me. Okay, say it with me. All right, you good?
Moses gave us the
Constitution. Hold on.
Oh no. Oh,
say it with me. Founding father. There we go.
Okay, so
it wasn't even
what's significant about Texas in particular?
You and your facts. You and your alternative facts don't matter.
Oh man.
Go ahead.
So what's significant about Texas in particular with textbooks is that Texas is the one, the books that they publish are overwhelmingly the ones that are dispensed to the rest of the U.S.
because of the buying size. Yeah. Because of the buying size.
So
right?
they are if you have something that's published a certain way or says a certain thing in a textbook in Texas, that's going to affect the entire school district of the entire country.
It's the Southwest. Southwest. The Southwest.
Okay. And R and Ra, I remember.
Yes, absolutely. This is Aaron and Lalandra made a big deal about it.
They were arguing. They had to come up to a board that was deciding. And they were
Texas
arguing
State Board
against,
of Education.
Yes, they were arguing against what was written in the textbooks at that point. One example was the Trail of Tears being described in the textbook as a migration that brought many people to Christ.
Exactly.
That's what it was described as.
So I just so the camera's there. So say it with me. Say it with me now. Moses was a founding father. There you go.
Alex, we got a question. Does Alex have any suggestions on how an atheist organization can improve racial minority participation?
I used to give.
I was about to ask that.
I actually used to talk about that years ago, and I found that outside of places of maybe San Antonio's done a really great job of really focusing. If you are a humanist organization, yes, it's much easier for you to find ways of working with interfaith groups and bridging. One of the problems that I had, not only was I an atheist, I was an anti-theist. Yes, I need a bigger sigh or a groan. I was one of those guys, right?
No,
And so I would go out there and
They can be reformed.
yes.
Not only an atheist, but a polemic bunny.
Oh my God, it was so bad. It was so bad. Do you remember the American Atheist billboard that had the whole slave thing and people just completely lost their minds over it?
What?
Yes.
Shit. They quoted a Bible verse.
Oh, okay, got it.
So everyone actually lost their stuff.
The epitome of freaking irony, right?
Right. So back then,
getting mad about a picture of slavery.
No, it was in Pennsylvania, so there were a few black people that were really upset, including black atheists. And I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking to myself, but that's kind of valid, right? I mean, that was me back then, and I'm like,
this is what's happening in your brain, kids.
Okay, and I was like, what if and this is how bad I used to be. I was like, I should get that in a t-shirt and just walk in and go have a conversation with a few churches. Yes, that's it. Slaves obey your masters. Terrible.
Even the cruel ones is the following.
How do you say that?
Yes,
before?
it was terrible.
Which non-believers is that?
It's American Atheist.
American Atheist.
Colossians.
Oh,
That was Colossians.
wow.
Colossians 3.
Colossians
So how do you
3:22.
feel about that?
It was okay. So, all right. So this is back then.
Did they
this
ask
is
anybody about
no.
that?
They didn't.
They didn't.
They didn't. And that my argument back then was, you probably should have had the only black member, do the introduction and talk about that because it would have went over differently. And I'm thinking at the time, you know what? I'd probably turn that into a t-shirt myself and go have conversations. That's not how you have conversations. And if you are a humanist that is trying to actually talk about racial injustice or any kind of injustice, or let's just say justice in general, when you want to talk about racial issues, turns out that still 95% of African Americans are religious. So you kind of need to leave that t-shirt at the door if you are interested in feeding people, in racial justice, and dealing with any kind of bridge building that positively affects the human experience. You can't bring that shirt with you. And so I actually wrote about it in, when I left quote unquote anti-theism, because for me, humanism is a lot more than that to me specifically.
Yeah. Here's another.
So to answer your question, so the first step that I tell people if they're trying to increase diversity in humanism is you need to meet people where they are. You need to get very uncomfortable. You need to cross the tracks. You need to have real conversations about their issues. You can't just make it about yourself and you. It can't be about increasing your numbers. It's about helping them, which is a big shift in focus of how do I incorporate you into my movement versus how can I help you? It's a big mental shift that had, and the first step is I said this, it's funny.
I'm glad you made the distinction though. You're saying if you want to be a good humanist.
If you want to be a good humanist.
It has nothing to say about.
Active where though? What were you going to say? Get very active where?
Where they are.
Where they are and where would that be? That's their church, right?
It depends. No, it doesn't have to be their church. Because out on the street, what I'm finding is there are, and what you guys don't see is we are seeing a degradation on the streets when people are marching, protesting, arguing about issues that affect them. Their questions are, what has the church done for me lately?
Mhm.
Where is your God now?
Mhm.
Yeah.
These are real questions that the youth are really legitimately asking. Jesse Jackson got chased out of a few protests with those questions.
Hmm.
And yet the church is showing up. You guys aren't. That's a wonderful opportunity.
So what are you referring to then? Like Black Lives Matter's protests?
Oh no, it
Or
doesn't
what
have
are
to
you-
be.
What are you talking about? I mean, what do we?
It doesn't have to be specifically Black Lives Matter. But anytime that you're dealing with a civil rights issue,
Okay.
when you're dealing with a minority issue,
How,
etc.
okay. I don't know. I mean, I think that sometimes people feel a little out of place there. Like it's not their fight, I think.
And that's
I
the
mean,
problem. And
yeah.
that's the problem. Why do you see me? Why do you see me so differently that it's not your fight?
I mean, I don't. But I think that some of the people involved do.
Of course they do.
This isn't your fight. Why are you here?
Right. So
I mean, it becomes this whole
this is this
thing.
and so this is where I question your humanism. Is it so one-sided? Is it so black and white that you don't see me as part of your own damn tribe, that you're willing to fight for a legitimate cause?
I think I just like to know the facts before getting involved in anything that might involve getting, shot or tasered or something.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll
not
use
a fan of
two words, one
physically
name.
jumping into
2 words, one
marches
name.
and
2 words, one name. Tamir Rice. Tamir Rice. Go ahead. Use that as an excuse to not get involved. I dare anyone.
As an excuse?
As an excuse to not get involved.
No, that wouldn't be a legitimate excuse.
Exactly. So regardless of the fact that, yes, when it comes to police crimes, police on anyone interactions, we're seeing a trend. When it comes to violence in general, homicide in general, FBI stats show that there's an increasing trend downward, where people are actually doing better and not having these issues, but they still exist.
Okay.
Why then wouldn't you speak up?
Can you tell me what the protests actually do? I mean, they bring visibility.
They do bring visibility. Sometimes they bring change. Sometimes they influence policy, which is actually what we should be working on. And as humanists, I would say that that's where you all wind up having the biggest influence. It's policy change, which only happens with numbers, right? Again, we talked about the 13%. African Americans only make up 13% of the population. When we take a look, and that's hyper-regional, right? So I go to Houston, I go to New York, I go to California, blah, blah, blah. I see where the influences can be. I go to Middle America, which Sarah Palin calls real America, where I may still see a large sample of racial or judicial pleadings and judgments that go in one very specific direction and not the other.
So I guess you keep bringing up humanist, the term humanist. I do identify as a humanist. I guess you obviously do as well.
I absolutely
do.
But I consider myself as a global humanist.
I don't think that
I actually consider myself a colorblind humanist.
Okay.
Right. I don't believe most people actually. I hate that term.
TJ doesn't identify as a humanist. Do you identify as a humanist?
Yes. You do. I've looked into it. I mean, there's just too much baggage.
There's a good portion of the atheist community that does not identify as humanist.
I 100% agree. A fraction. I would say that there's a right, exactly.
But I think what you're saying also is the demographic that is involved enough to know something about what that means, versus the larger atheist community that doesn't get involved in
or doesn't
learning
care
about the stuff.
Or doesn't care.
That's just their identification. It doesn't mean that they have an
interest
in it.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah, because there's a small minority that is atheist and they identify just in their own minds maybe as atheist.
I don't think it's a small minority.
Versus a smaller one that's actually wanting to be active and actually cares about this community.
I think Okay, so a couple weeks ago, I was
It's not
at.
that you don't care.
No, I'm saying you are one of the people that cares about the atheist community in terms of like you look at the issues and you have an interest in reading about it. I'm saying not a lot of people.
Now he's going to tell us why he
it.
doesn't like black people.
Oh.
Wait, what?
Exactly. No, it's like
Well,
when people are on ostensibly
I'm so
the same
messing with
side,
him, by the way. Go ahead.
Yeah.
when people are ostensibly on the same side of an issue as I would like to think that I agree with them for the right reasons and that they're actually also believing things that are true and correct. So if we're on the same side, I don't have to go, look at these people, they think like I do on this one subject and they're great. But man, there's this whole other side that's like, man, why? You know, like,
Well, there's
I wish
a lot
you
of
weren't on my side, because when you're on my side, it makes me, it's like I'm holding on to the
So
same
is
beliefs.
that why you don't like black people?
Wait, what?
This is gonna be this is ongoing gag. This is the ongoing gag now. This is the gag. Lean into it. Okay, so I did a talk where I introduced an idea a couple weeks ago. I was at PostCon, the Pennsylvania Atheist Get Bored, the whole thing, and I had a real I had a moment where I think I consider myself an atheist with a humanist passport. Okay, so an atheist with a humanist passport, which allows me the ability to go from atheist event to atheist event to atheist event, and allows me to knock on atheist doors. But at the heart of it, I am really a humanist, and I occasionally visit. Really, I occasionally visit. In that passport, I have different pages that I call allyship. So when I want to talk about specific issues on LGBT issues, etc., then I need to get that visa re-upped. And I think that allyship is something that you are measured on. It's not something that you get to proclaim, I'm an ally, I'm an ally. It's like, why are you an ally?
Don't even really want to care about that part of the community.
That's fine.
Can we just talk about like the not believing in a God thing? Like,
okay, so hold on, but that's fine. Hold on, but that's fine as long as you are willing to not be hypocritical about it. Wait. As long as you're not going to be hypocritical about it, because when I stand up and I want to talk about race, because you want to talk about diversity, let's talk about diversity because that's what you want to talk about. However, when you have someone like Sam Harris that decides all of a sudden that despite never reading a book on it, regardless of his credentials, because that doesn't matter.
wow,
That doesn't matter. Decides that he wants to talk about identity politics, something he doesn't clearly understand, you're willing to denounce him then too, and tell him to shut up and talk specifically, hold on, and only talk about atheism. And only talk about atheism.
Yeah, we get
right? Because that's gotta be it.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're only gonna talk about atheism, that's all you talk about. And nothing else. Either that,
nobody's telling anybody,
or you're one-sided.
The thing is though, is that I'm also not standing up and saying, "Hey, shut up."
Which also means you get to tell Richard Dawkins to never say anything about feminism. Which also means that you get to tell Sargon that he doesn't get to talk about it either. He should only be talking about atheism, the one thing that we agree on. Now, what kind of echo chamber does that create? Same thing with many of the other podcasters, which I won't mention right now.
This is from
all right, preach, man.
So what?
Well, I almost went there.
Yeah, that's pretty close.
That's pretty close, right?
It's a good sermon.
Thank you
We're
very much.
switching gears a little bit here. You can just comment on this quickly, but in a patriarchal structure that we have now, can the U.S. ever
I'm
have a woman?
set up. That's a setup.
That is a setup.
Can we ever have a woman president with the current patriarchal structure?
Who said
in
that?
politics? I'm going to keep it anonymous.
Is that you or a comment?
No, it's someone in this room.
Okay.
So what do you think?
No, it was actually
She would know more about it than me.
it's not me
Because she's actually looked at some of the stuff on that. I really haven't. At like the stats on like whether we're in like a patriarchy kind of thing. I just know that's
Okay,
like
so since you're
I
a
just
white
know that's
woman,
really-
hold on.
no,
I get
it's
to
not
do
what I
this.
meant. It's
Hold
not
on.
what I meant.
that's debatable.
So since you're a white woman,
debatable.
could you please explain to me why 53% of white women voted for Trump?
Oh, that's the Christian evangelicals.
That makes
That's
sense.
my mama.
That's
My mama too. That's
so.
that's,
So if we're gonna
yeah.
talk about the patriarchy, we have to start there. 53%
Mm.
of white women decided they were going to vote. They were going to go
Yeah,
for Trump.
I mean,
So do
that's-
you believe that within that construct, that we can actually have a white woman president?
No.
Really?
Well, yeah. Well, if
Wait
no,
a minute.
no,
she said no.
well, that
That's-
makes sense. I mean,
Yeah,
because
no, they
because
don't
of
think
that voting
they
demographic.
think that men are the head of the household, and if a woman can't lead the household, they certainly can't lead a country. I mean, playing
Well,
devil's
but not
advocate
not
here,
all of those
that's-
women maybe
that's-
voted for that reason though, because there was a big part of the voting
Well,
demographic that
they-
wanted her to not be more of
they-
the same. And
Help me,
they give
TJ.
themselves other reasons. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
Come
we
on.
can't
I don't
trust
have a voice
Hillary.
in
We
this
can't.
No,
I
you
mean,
gotta tell.
Which I'm gonna give them that much. I mean, surely, there might have been some distrustful things that she had done. I mean, but
Getting schooled. Huh?
No. Tell. No. You gotta
what?
tell me. No.
Why?
No. This can't be.
Come on, no.
No, because once upon a time, I said, and this was not too long ago, this is probably 12 years ago, no way does America, 12 years ago, and I still
Mhm.
believe 12 years ago, that America votes in an African-American president.
Mm.
12 years ago. I'm like,
Mm.
no way does that ever happen.
So that was
Mm.
actually his election year, though, wasn't it? Like,
No, it was like 9.5 years ago, like that.
well, I think we can. I think a female president could be voted in.
So
but-
what do you mean by that? Like you
I was full
do you
on
feel like
wrong.
you let your guard down a little bit because, wow, America. Excuse me, guys. America voted for.
What are you? What are
America
you
voted
drinking, and
for
why is it?
an African American man? Therefore, we should.
What?
You thought I'd be a shoo-in for Hillary.
Wait a minute.
Is that what?
How come you have so much more than she does?
Because he added other things to it. That looks like it's straight. Mine has lemon juice.
Kofefe.
Good family.
And why is you're the only one that's
Okay.
invisible, man? We don't know what you're drinking over
Where did
here.
Jim go anyway? Okay, so I'm gonna ask you
Bartender.
this question. This is my question specifically here. I want you to talk about rap culture. I really do. Mhm. How many hours do you have?
How do we? Oh man. Okay, so this one is how do we reach young Black men, and how much does rap culture affect their mentality and behavior? Okay, so music, and this is one of the things that I think is hard for us with and without challenging. The first one is that I come from a culture or come from an era where we were trying to make certain words disappear, just flat out, just disappear. We were the
Good luck with that.
we were the anti-violence, blah blah blah, really focused on trying to move forward kind of rap music, even with it was, it's politically charged, Public Enemy, and some of the other ones.
I know that there's some of the more alternative rappers.
They weren't alternative back then.
Okay.
It was mainstream for us because I grew up in New York.
Yeah.
And then something happened on the West Coast. And we started having this conversation about, is that beginning to overtake what we're talking about here?
They're rapping about like rims and guns and money and drugs
and everything. And it turns out, and this is
it
also,
doesn't help.
But it turns out that that music is descriptive. right? It is descriptive. And it is not prescriptive. It's not telling you to go out and do this.
But it's very powerful.
Hold
it
on.
can like
I agree.
perpetuate.
Right.
Yeah.
It perpetuates it, but it doesn't mean that it is the original sin. It is not what started it. And so what we wind up having, and yes, music and culture is sticky. Hip hop culture is very sticky. But when we take a look at least back then, music was very descriptive. So what we had going on the West Coast in terms of crime, violence, police interactions, etc., which wound up carrying over across the country, NWA is probably the best example of it, is a description of what was happening, why they stuck.
Yeah.
If it wasn't relative to the South, Chicago, etc., it would have been dismissed, and it wasn't. So how do you reach Black men through rap culture, given that rap culture, or hip hop culture specifically, because hip hop is actually considered a culture?
Well, that's what I meant, hip hop. Yeah.
Which, by the way, is actually yes, your whiteness is wrong. Which, by the way, and several people have reminded me of this. It is actually hip hop culture is now recognized by United Nations as a specific culture. So it kind of exists without race, because we know that contributions can happen without race. So it's a hip hop culture.
It's
right.
This happened several years ago.
Well, obviously, I'm on the outside. I mean, from the outside, I see it kind of being a vicious cycle a little bit. Where I mean, you know, rapping about baby mamas, and it's. If you want to change the music, you have to change the environments that give rise. Okay,
to
so
that
how
music.
do you change the environment?
Oh, that's a completely different issue.
All right, well, go for it.
Completely different
I
issue.
know what the issue is.
So, one of the things that you have to address is wealth inequality. That's something that you just have to do.
How do you fix that?
You can't.
You can't.
You really can't.
Well, then we're just screwed.
So,
Yeah. Entirely. You're entirely screwed.
Podcast is over, everybody.
You know. Well,
we
okay.
solved it,
Yeah. So addressing and this is funny, because this is where a lot of the arguments with the U.S.'s new populist message comes from. It's wealth inequality. And yes, absolutely. If you can address wealth inequality, you can actually address some of those disparities, which go across some of the racial issues as well. Right?
Yeah.
You know, would we actually consider universal basic income in this country with the incoming, with the increasing automation that actually is occurring? My background is actually IT, intelligence, etc. So this is something that I actually study for a living. And the reality is, no, we won't. So this only perpetuates itself.
Well, I mean,
but how do you
fix it?
Yeah.
You can't.
Well,
if you can't,
Alex, you're here for answers.
Okay. So all right.
So I think where you're going with this, though, is the only way to fix it is to disenfranchise some people for the benefit of some other.
No. What I'm saying is that's already happened. Okay. You're exactly. So you need to go exactly. I'm saying that's already happened. LBJ talked about it several years ago.
Now we actually have an existent welfare program now in this country. I mean, it's.
Can we talk about that? Is it either like, is it helping or hurting more? What do you think? Well,
it's both.
Yes to both.
Yes to both, because of other issues that are contributing to it.
Well, don't you think that culture is a part of it? Because, like, say, like a young Black man might be like that. Nothing more is expected of them. They're gonna go and get it.
How do we
look? This might sound racist, but you know it's true that they go and get like pregnant, and then they are able to get government assistance in order to raise their children. I mean, it's
what?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I have never ever thought about that ever in my existence. I've never thought about running around getting other women pregnant.
Mine's,
Hold on,
mine's anecdotal, but I've met.
But the government
I've met
incentives.
plenty of guys who.
I grew up with a one parent single parent home.
And why was that?
And because my dad was a POS.
Okay. Why was that?
Why was that?
I'm gonna keep asking why.
Why?
It
It had nothing to do with welfare. It had nothing to do with anything that he liked to sleep around.
No, but
And it had hold on. No.
Why was that socially acceptable?
What? Because we came from the Caribbean and we
I
didn't.
think it's socially acceptable. It's just a thing that just happens.
It is something that it is something that
But
happens.
it happens 70% of the time now in young Black American homes,
I-
as opposed to 20%.
I think he's getting.
Bum,
into
bum,
that.
bum.
So is there 3 times
So-
as much racism in
So
America as
why
there is
why
in
is it
Mexico?
why is it that you don't like Black people again?
Oh no.
No, I mean it's a
That's-
question that
You're gonna be
deserves
in a
answering.
meme now.
No. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
right.
So
when was
this
the
is-
day you cited,
This is where the actual conversation here does get significantly more nuanced, because
Yeah.
it's not an if or, it's an and discussion, right? So when we start talking about policy and how policy has affected the behavior, etc., absolutely true. But when you take a look at the other side of policies, such as policing, over policing, and how specifically the war on drugs has impacted
That's a whole other
the
level.
African American
Yeah.
home,
Mhm.
which you cannot exclude and be intellectually honest in the discussion
Right.
at all.
Yes. That is a
Especially
huge
not
factor.
with the many revelations. You just
So-
cannot.
Private prisons. How do you feel about those?
Oh.
That's not really.
I thought we were
Dude, are we taking a
almost
break?
there. We were almost there.
Yeah.
We were
We were almost gonna be a boring
there.
show, and then-
we was almost there. So private prisons, and of course we have the occasional case where we've seen that judges, one particular judge in particular, so of course you've got to say that all of the judges do it now, have shown that they really were slanting the decisions so that they could get kickbacks from private prisons with high prosecution. Remember that case?
Well, just I mean,
Yeah,
that's an ongoing situation.
It's an ongoing situation, and we know that when you take a look at the judicial rates, etc., of incarceration, it's like you gotta ask questions. Like just in New York alone, stop and frisk. I mean, that was like, oh my God, that's a nightmare in itself. Why is it now that the opioid in the United States today is a problem that requires compassion and treatment, and yet 30 some odd years ago the crack epidemic was you need more prisons?
Wow.
Again, this is a remnant of, and we cannot dismiss our history in making these decisions.
Can you do a quick summary of like the privatized prison industry?
Like, break down.
Can you do that? I want to hear your sermon about that.
While at least think about that. Hey, I gotta feel these are coming at me.
Oh no.
Oh no.
The fundamentalist Protestantism, is it a barrier to income equality?
Yes.
Okay, that's easy. Australia, selective hiring campaign to ensure gender balance in the police force. Would you support a similar measure that would increase the number of men in predominantly women, like nursing, primary psychology?
This is way off topic, but
I know,
We
but
just
what?
hit it and go.
Hold on. What do you think?
I think no, because I think that. Okay.
Women are okay. Let me give you a prompt. Let me give you a prompt. Hold on.
Yes.
Yeah. Hold on. Wait. No. Wait. Is it
No, it
is it
doesn't.
diversity for diversity's sake, or is it diversity for the increase and improvement of treatment for the population?
Yeah, but it's not.
I see what you're saying, because
Is it?
they're a source of authority. Like they're
I don't. Let's say that it's not a
Okay.
source of authority. Let's say that certain men tend to, in some cultural context matters, right, will react better and deal better with men in nursing, etc. Well, I mean, we know why.
No, I'm
dismiss
just saying
why.
but
But of course
a
it's
lot of
true.
people don't realize that.
Right,
But,
okay.
Exactly.
but
Come on, seriously.
You pick up on it in the workforce, absolutely.
Absolutely. It's like, okay, when
I go into the doctor's office, I don't want a woman touching me just because
So-
it's weird.
Well, no, but
Right,
that's
right,
a
right,
medical
right.
preference.
right,
That's not
right.
hiring.
So who do you want?
You know what I'm saying?
Who do
He's
you
seen
want to
that stuff
ask to?
before, you know?
Who do you want to ask? Yeah. Who would you prefer ask you to cough?
Yeah.
A male doctor.
Every
I was
guy
related to
gets.
police officers.
And it's not because I have some internalized hatred of women.
No. And
it's because
yeah.
I feel I hold women in a special regard. So I don't want a woman like medically handling.
Wait, I got this.
So
So why don't you hold black people in that same regard?
Alex, would
Wait,
you?
no, it's another man. It's another man. I don't
I'm
give a
gonna
shit.
keep messing with you at this
Unless
point.
you got- unless
At
you
this
got
point,
a
I'm just
foot
gonna
part of his
mess it with
anatomy
you.
inside parts of
I'm
my
just gonna mess
anatomy.
with you.
Okay.
At this point.
Okay.
If
Yes,
women,
oh,
women in Australia are not preferring to go into police force and this aggressive campaign to get the balance, would you support that kind of measure from the get-go?
What?
Okay, if women just don't naturally prefer the police force as much as the men, let's just
They
say,
don't choose to go.
let's say that they don't make the choice to go into law enforcement.
Oh, okay, as a
often
career.
men.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then would you support an Australian initiative to bring that to equal numbers?
You're kind of adding in
The preference.
you're prefacing that with
Some
a
jobs
fact
are preferred by
that
certain
a lot of
sexes.
people don't
We
know.
can agree on that.
that
No,
Can we? Can we?
I can
Can we
understand,
agree?
like,
Can we say that
I
is?
guess I'm fucking in this.
Can we
now.
say that?
Yeah. Can we say that that's true and an independent variable and not
Mhm.
subject
Yes.
to cultural
Right.
variables?
Yeah.
Right.
Because
Right?
Like not inherent.
No,
versus-
look.
NFL linebacker,
I have
crab
things.
fisherman, deep sea welder.
You're going to extreme examples though.
There's some that because of our
Can we go Faye?
sexual dimorphism.
Okay, but again, like fields like that, fields like that, like being a fireman. It's not.
Women do not want to be construction workers. Women do not want to be plumbers. They don't want to be
But not
working as
necessarily.
stewards.
Right?
Not
And
They
necessarily.
also
choices-
don't like
choices-
working at Google,
And their
evidently.
choices to do that are not
Tech-
Right.
right?
Because
is
women are
mostly
more-
male preferred.
Of course it is.
Women like to work with people. Men
But
like to work
why?
with things. Men like- it's a biological. Women
Why?
No, women
But
are
why?
wired. Women are wired
Yeah.
to
That's true.
be nurtured, like to be able to nurture a child, like a child that comes out of.
Okay, I'm gonna get
Yeah.
way on
We're
this side
getting-
over here.
We're getting into psychology,
Okay,
baby.
Yeah. So women. So,
Yeah.
So why don't you like women again?
When did you start hating?
Okay.
Wait.
I hate
Can
them
we
so
break
much
this
that
down?
I
Can we break this down?
practically married.
Hold on. Wait. So wait a minute. I just had this argument with the racist who said, "Why sleep with a black woman?" So it's like it doesn't matter who you married. But okay.
All right.
I would have laughed
You can
if you
still
had said
be-
something else said or something.
No.
That's what I was waiting for.
It has to do with it has to do with the biological differences between men and women.
Oh, biological
No,
differences.
yes,
Trigger
there
word,
are biological
trigger word,
It's not a trigger word. It's
trigger
just.
word. No, it's not right.
Content of warning.
It's
It's
not.
no
okay.
longer right.
Okay,
It's
it's-
not. It doesn't. No.
Yeah, we can say that's definitely not conclusive.
Science daily.
In the least.
Infants
Oh.
prefer toys
I
tied
agree.
to their gender at birth.
Have you
Okay.
seen this?
Are you seriously now doing the what is it, Reddit bingo?
No.
You are doing
It's not
Reddit
Reddit.
bingo.
Let's discuss it.
Reddit bingo.
It's in a reputable journal.
Google.
It was a
Google.
Norwegian
Google.
study.
Yeah, you
Yes.
saw it too, right?
Okay.
The doctor,
Can I go back to firemen real quick?
fireman.
I
Firemen.
want to
In
understand why you
terms
hate
of
women.
in terms of a
at this
career.
point. Why do you hate women so much?
No, it's not a productive question. Okay, so with firemen, there are less women in that position, right? But part of that can be the screening process of upper body versus lower body fitness with training to be firemen, and you don't
Not
necessarily
just with training. It's
with-
just the
with,
way
uh,
that the
with-
body develops.
well,
It's
no, but
upper body strength.
yeah,
is
that's what
gonna
I
be
mean.
more
Is that what
prominent
they focus
in men.
on
Everything okay over there?
for qualifying you to be a fireman
That's like,
is upper body versus lower body.
Yes.
And that primarily that is separating women from men, and that is a physical thing.
Yeah.
I'll
I'll tell you right now, though.
but so
I mean,
that's
a
all-
woman-
that's the
any
point I
woman
was
can
going
be
to
a
make.
fireman just like a man can.
But that's what I mean, is that that's when you're in the actual field.
So,
Like when you're in the actual task of being in that field, yes, but the requirements for you to get your certification for that favors men over women physically.
Absolutely.
That was the difference.
Yeah. I mean,
So I've got a question for you, because I've had this argument way too many times with former and retired military members, where we know that, you know, they're looking at higher qualifications. That, I mean, the bar is set really high when it comes to women. Would you be in favor of women-only platoons that didn't have the same specific barrier to entry? So instead of carrying a 55-pound Alice pack, you only needed a 35-pound Alice pack or a 25-pound Alice pack, so that when you were dragging someone out of a hole, of a foxhole, it was a woman and not a guy.
Right.
Which is really very it tends to be a gendered test.
Yeah. And I think recognizing, you know, it's just like, for me, just like learning disabilities, you have to find your own way to achieve the same task. And it may be using certain tools to even that playing field, or you know, making a difference of who you're surrounded with and what tasks you work on as a group, versus just mixing everyone up and expecting everyone to meet this certain bar in a certain way. Because I think that's the difference, is you can still meet that bar, you just may have to reach it in a different way. And that's what's not accounted for in certification. Like
In different ways.
Firefighting. Like firefighting, women can just as easily be a firefighter in the actual field.
okay.
But the requirement to get into that certification, to pass that test, it favors men physically.
So
because
okay,
it,
so
then
the question comes in,
because it focuses on
You think
upper
there's a
body
big
strength
reason for
versus
that?
lower body strength.
So
Do you think that that the reason for that isn't warranted though?
What do you mean?
the reason for what?
Oh,
It
I see
being
where you're going.
gender specific because men generally on average are biologically different than women and may
That's the
have
point.
some additional upper body strength.
That's the point.
And
Is that
upper body
is
strength
that-
is
is that
important in
in-
that specific
what I'm
position.
saying is in the field, in the actual field, women can perform just as well as men, but they just may distribute their weight differently
They
or whatever.
compensate differently.
But in the training to get to that point, and in the certification to become a fireman before you get to the field, the way that they test you over accentuates upper body strength versus lower body strength, and so it favors men in getting into the field,
So what's
but
wrong?
You really think
in a
that
way
there's
that may not be necessary for you
reason
to
for that,
actually
though.
succeed in the field.
No, hold on. Is there a reason outside of a cultural bias?
Yes.
Yeah, upper
Yes.
body strength is important.
Ability to do the
That's
job.
Hold on,
what, that's what I'm
wait.
saying, is
But-
when they're
but is the
actually in the
question-
field.
How is it biased?
So hold on. Is what's important? So I guess this is the question: is upper body strength important, or is it being able to pick up the person, throwing them over the shoulder, and doing a fireman's carry more important than actually testing for upper body
you got to
strength?
be able to make it out of the building too. That requires endurance, and if you don't have the upper body strength to
Did I already say that? I
endure,
already said
You
it.
did.
I did.
I thought.
I
so.
said that a couple times.
I thought so.
That
But-
in the field,
And the
women perform just as well on the actual tasks
The ones that
that
can
they
make it
need.
through.
The ones
Less
that can
women
make it
can
through,
make
yeah.
it through though.
No, but what I'm saying is that to get through the training, you have to meet a different requirement than the actual field. That's what I'm saying. Is it's disproportionately favoring upper body strength versus the actual tasks of the field.
I'm not laughing at you. I was
No, I
laughing.
know.
His
I'm laughing
expression.
too much.
I know.
The minimum basic requirement to be a firefighter is tied, or it should be, and if it's not, it should be.
Mm-hmm.
It's to run 100 meters, pick up a 180-pound dummy, and drag them backwards back to the starting point.
Mm-hmm.
The physical fitness test to become a firefighter is directly proportional, directly related to what you're going to do in the field. Less women can pass that. That's a fact.
No, but that's what I'm saying, is that in the actual field, that may be disproportionately filtering out people that would be able to perform in the actual
But, yeah,
field,
the original
but
question
not
was,
in that way.
right. The original question was, all things being equal, let's say we're sexually dimorphically exactly the same.
But we're not.
Just for, hypothetically. Just
There's
hypothetically.
no.
But it doesn't
Why are women
matter.
not choosing to go into?
It's a useless.
No.
No,
hypothetical because it's not true.
it's so not true.
Oh,
And
we know it's not.
I
But
almost
it doesn't matter.
right. I almost, and it almost doesn't matter what the conversation is if you're starting with I want everything to be truly egalitarian versus everything is assuming that everything is egalitarian. You're immediately missing the case.
In sense of opportunity, at least, anyway.
Yeah, they think. Yeah.
You can't dictate the quality of the outcome. People are just different. Human beings are different.
They are.
But is that what's
You
keeping
can't
women out of
guarantee-
the firefighter force? Because they don't think that they
But you
can
may
cut
be-
the
but
mustard.
Child rearing
in-
is
in a
another thing that
field
keeps
like
them out of the
firefighting-
force. I mean,
In a field like
the
firefighting,
mom is most likely the one to stay home with the child. I mean, I mean,
Well, this study says
I'm
that
serious. It sounds sexist, but it's
just what happens.
So when I was
If a
raising
mom
when I was raising my children
when
by
you're raising your
myself,
children
by myself
by yourself.
for
Oh.
several years.
Oh, come on, speak up. I want to hear it.
No, that's good.
No,
well, I mean, it's anecdotal though, but
It is anecdotal.
it is.
but it's-
It is totally anecdotal.
Yeah.
It may just be a
but
fun
what's
story.
but what's
is a
the
fun
purpose
story.
of that? Like,
The purpose of the mom.
what's
Breastfeeding
what was
and-
the point you were making with that?
I don't know what the purpose of breastfeeding is.
No, I'm saying the purpose. The purpose
I
of
mean-
you saying that. The purpose.
I don't know why it happened that way. Biology just made it that way.
Well,
But-
this
Yeah,
this
no,
got
listen.
it's got a lot more interesting. I'm just gonna step back.
No, the purpose-
we can give them a lot of progesterone.
What I'm
They
saying
can
is-
maybe produce milk.
No,
It
they do.
happens.
They
Yeah,
can.
I know.
But what? Yeah. What?
This just got awkward for
We'll just
everybody.
make everybody genderless.
this is the
I can't
study
get to
that-
my question. All right.
Okay,
No,
no,
I want-
that's
I-
your
I
I
question.
can't.
want this.
I can't.
No.
I'm
This-
trying.
So,
Oh, go
tell
ahead.
me, when did you start hating white women?
You mean the ones that married?
Exactly.
Why are you hating
It doesn't
so
mean
much?
anything that you're married to a white woman.
That's exactly
This is the study
That's
that
true.
Brett
when
and
they
I-
started voting against them and me. How's that?
This is the study that Brett and I were referring to. It's not Reddit bingo. This was we actually saw an entire documentary on this. But
Yeah.
children as young as 9 months old prefer to play with toys specific to their own gender, and this is from a actual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Mhm.
What?
Okay. What does that have to do with anything? What would that mean?
Choices you make, career choices.
Career
Why there's
choices.
disproportionate number of 80% of psychologists are female, or secondary.
What does that have to do
education.
with
Women are
that?
better at different things than men.
Wait, what?
The original question was,
Not-
should
like
Australia?
better things?
We're
or worse
different.
things?
Australia
different things.
We're different.
What's happening?
We're different.
Okay, there's too many things
One-
happening.
One
One
is,
thing at a
it's not
time.
that one is better than the other.
It's
It's
just
we're
different.
good
It's
at
two
different
But
things.
the original
Okay, but
question
again, what does that have to do with that?
All of
The original-
humanity is
the original
beautiful, but-
question
well,
was-
some of it isn't.
is Australia justified in trying to make
Trying to force there to be women cops.
Equal
in
number
the-
of-
person is missing.
Like,
The
they're trying to-
original question was about firefighters.
No,
It's
I'm
about police
female
officers.
firefighters.
It's about
and
police officers.
But what does that have to
First
do with
responders.
the
It's the same thing.
toys?
first responders.
Mhm.
What does that have to do with the toys they prefer?
Psychological development of a child
Yeah.
Yeah.
based on their gender.
Okay, the preference of a child's toy.
Based
What does
on
that
their
have
gender,
to do
male or
with what the
female.
rules should be of what qualifies someone to enter
That
the field
it's-
of being a
it's
fireman?
un-
Unnecessary to try to
Directly,
equalize.
it just we're giving it as an example.
Okay, but
Our
how
things
would
are
that?
different.
How would the toys a child prefers
It smashes the idea-
affect
yeah.
their workforce thing?
It smashes the
Why
idea
does that
there's
Smashes the
just
idea. I'm gonna
gender-
wait.
Oh,
Stop.
Let me finish.
gender cultural roles. If you think gender
How
roles
does that
are
what?
completely 100% cultural, they're
I
not.
wanted him not to use the word smashes because
Okay.
I'm like, you're gonna
But-
use one
But
study.
you're going
every
the
single-
way extreme.
I'm using like 5
You're right.
studies every single
You're right,
time.
You're right. Yeah, you're right.
It's like one study
say
smashes
you're right.
something.
But
Okay.
but the other part of that sentence was it smashes cultural what?
Gender cultural roles.
How does that do
That a
that?
gender role is 100% cultural.
Okay, stop. How does one study?
It doesn't.
Okay.
It
Okay. Just-
it gives you pause.
But
Does it?
does it?
A little, maybe.
Depending on
I saw
depending on the strength of the study.
there's other studies that back it up, and Britt and I saw this an entire documentary just based on these studies.
Okay, but okay, how does it demonstrate that specifically? How does it demonstrate striking down at all the idea that
Career
gender
choice.
what?
You're talking career choice.
I'm saying does the toys that are preference, which is only a personal preference, right? How does that inform career choice? Like,
Yeah.
why does that
Yeah,
matter?
That's a stretch. I give you that.
Because the career that you choose is, I don't see how that's related at all to the toys you played with when you were 3. Like, I don't understand that.
It may not. It just gives you a basic idea that if we try to attribute career choice to just a gender role, like I'm not supposed to be a cop, so I'm not going to apply for
Now
the police
that would be
force.
wrong. But I mean, are we really saying that we're putting an undue like bullshit like roadblock in the way of women becoming police officers? Though is that what the charge is?
Wait a minute.
again?
Are you saying women can be police officers?
No, I'm asking a question. What I'm asking is what you're saying that we're like being discriminatory, like people are being discriminatory towards women in their police department because they're putting these like restrictions on who can be a police officer and who can't?
What I would say from a layman perspective on that.
I mean, do you think it's
No, don't be a layman.
But
incorrect discrimination, or do you think it's
I would think it's unintentional screening out that can be corrected when you point it out.
Is it wrong?
It is wrong because it's still screening.
Why?
But it's not morally wrong on the part of the people that made the rules because they didn't realize.
It's not a
because
moral imperative, but
wait.
You're saying it's morally virtuous.
Will you let me finish, please? Okay. Okay. It's not that the person making the rules is sexist. It's about they unintentionally created that situation where certain people would be screened out. And when I talk about sexism and racism, that's more what I mean. It's not intentional. It's a byproduct of the system that was created a long time ago with just white men in the workforce, creating rules and regulations and stuff that is systemic in the rules, but that as an accidental byproduct screens out certain people, certain minorities, certain women, certain races, to where the point of pointing that out is to make it better because the people who are in those workforces now don't want that to be happening. But to point it out creates a better system that's more inclusive.
It begs the question though, because you're saying, it has a measurable numbers of female police officers or law enforcement officers, whatever you want to call them. But then you'd also, if you use the same logic and you used it with any other like job or designation where you could definitely see where either being a man or a woman would have impact on that job, right? Like say, like I couldn't go to somebody that put an ad out in the paper for a surrogate and say, okay, I'm here to be your surrogate. Well, you lack one important part of the anatomy that's required for this position. Okay, you don't have a womb.
Okay, what does that have to do with what I was saying?
Lost
exactly.
Right now.
So, because it's incidental.
What?
The barriers that you're talking about.
Having a womb is less than incidental.
It's a part of your physiology, right? That makes you not as good as another person at that position, right?
It makes it not apply to you, yeah.
Exactly.
But what are you saying?
So
that the police force doesn't apply to women?
Well, there can be distinctions based on physiology. And if women are on average much less likely to have that physiology that's required, then that's the reason for the criteria.
So
you know what I'm saying?
Having a womb specifically makes you a crappy police officer.
No, I'm talking about we're using this in an analogous situation where it's
why do you hate women?
You're getting it where you're trying to like get a job, right? Like, and the job in the paper that's
hold on. Okay, so it requires that you have a womb. And are you saying that requiring having a womb? I'm trying to be serious. So requiring having a womb.
It requires a certain physiology from you, right?
That's a stretch.
You have to physiologically.
That's a stretch.
Okay, wait. So what you're saying is that being
And if you're not at this
Wait,
specific threshold of
Physiology.
Wait,
physiology,
Okay.
Wait.
So
what you just compared was, hold on. What you just compared was being in the police force is just as much of a requirement to be male as having as being a surrogate.
I want to go there. I want to go there.
Just said.
No, it's not. Don't straw man.
That's
Don't
not
straw
what I
man. Don't straw man. Not straw man yet.
No.
She's trying to create the
I'm
argument.
clarifying
Yes.
what you just said.
I'm
Right.
saying you're incorrect. That's not what I said.
But you can finish.
Okay, hold on. Let her finish first.
You can let me
Yeah.
finish clarifying what that is.
Well, you've already made it. You're already in error. That's not what I'm saying.
Let her finish.
So let me say what I really said.
Okay, but I can
And that
complete
may be
that thought
informed.
and then you can correct it. But that was it. I was kind of able to with all the talking. Go ahead.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that you have to be a
Yeah.
man. It's that you have to have these certain physiological characteristics. You have to be strong. You have to be able to pull people out of burning buildings. You have to be able to do stuff with the body that you have. Same thing with if
Okay.
you use any other.
So I'm gonna
Job.
mansplain this to you. I think I'm gonna have to mansplain this.
Go ahead.
Okay. So
You just not said mansplain.
yeah, we're gonna have to mansplain this. So
That's a sexist term.
so we have to.
I
Up top.
agree. But
Up top, Jim, don't let me hang.
Okay. So
okay.
So
It applies appropriately. It's sexual segregating, whatever you would call that. But it's appropriate sometimes. Go ahead. That term.
I don't have enough.
Mark asked, do women and men apply for the police jobs at the same rate?
Can you say that?
Probably not.
No, I don't think that's true.
But again, 1, 2, 3. Why? Go ahead.
Because women make different choices than men.
Or is
But
it
based on
that?
what?
Yeah, based on what? Is it that?
Because we're making them make
Wait,
different.
wait,
it's
hold
like-
on. Wait. So you
No.
can't ignore the fact that we, generally speaking, all of us contribute to what we expect from people, right? I mean that we make up
Yeah, if you
what's
want to live in a
wait.
world where people don't steal and rape and kill, you don't steal, rape, and kill. No, that's
not what you just said.
it's-
I'm sorry. That's not what you just said at all. No, it's not.
I'm on my social science side.
No. I'm sorry. I'm really not trying to make fun of you or anything. It's just that it was striking.
When you get out of a society, what you put into is what you're saying.
No, it's not what you're saying.
No.
Then what? Okay, then
No.
clarify.
In fact, I'm saying that society gets to demand or we contribute to what the societal norms are. We get to define what those rules are.
Like my perspective
Right, we're not
informs
relativistic here, though.
the standard
Let's not get into
as a
relative.
like my perspective and yours and his collectively create the standard of what we think this person should be and what the qualifications should be.
Well-
If 100 men and 100 women applied for a firefighter position, how many of each group would make the minimum requirement?
It very much depends on your randomization strategy. Okay,
Mhm.
so if I said that I wanted 100 highly qualified women, and I defined it as this, and I said I wanted 100 highly qualified men, and I defined it as this, right? Both of them, and I put them together, and I said I wanted 50 of each. Well, 100% would get in, right? I mean, 100% of my specific targets.
Mm.
Are we saying that we want to apply different standards of entry? Are we saying that we want the same standards?
Why is anyone? No one's
Why
saying
do we
that.
have to?
No one's saying that, right? Okay.
That's kind of what I was saying.
Yeah.
No. Oh, okay.
Kind
That's
of.
what- yeah, that is.
No,
That
the
is what
standards
she
should be the
said.
same.
No, I'm talking about adjusting the standard, not changing, but just tweaking it to where it is inclusive of what will still be useful in the field, but doesn't necessarily adhere to what we previously thought would be required in the field when it really doesn't.
But what if the standard right now is the minimum basic requirement to be a fully trained firefighter already?
What I'm saying is examining what is actually required in the field and re-examining whether the qualification is an accurate representation of what's
What's
required
in the field. Yes, what's required in the field. Right.
Because that's what I was saying about upper body versus lower body, because women changing, you know, their weight distribution or whatever, they can find a way to make that happen, the same task. But it may not be true where they can do that accommodation in a testing scenario.
So this is kind of the conversation that we kind of had earlier on, is how do we blind? So, I mean, we know what the objective is. How do we blind, whether it is cultural or genetic or racial? How do we blind those specific targets that influence our decision making?
Yeah. Well,
So that you can go back to, this is what the actual objective really
In the
is.
example you gave, you said change their names around because there are some names. Oh, you know, David Johnson, the one that was just, you know, that Trump just mentioned. You know, there's certain names that, oh, that's black. You know,
Yeah.
And so if you change the names around, male, female,
Or blind it completely.
or just the results of the test are fed with names changed to the hiring process.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We can
But
test that, and we
also-
know that
Yeah.
to be true.
Also, I don't know if there's a screening process that happens with people applying to train in the first place, with men versus women being seen as we need this many or whatever.
Ooh, quotas.
But also, just an anecdotal for me, when I was in working in a certain restaurant, there was a certain task that I was specifically told by male managers that for them personally was easier to train men than to train women, and that task happened to be the only way you could get into management. And so there were many more men in the management of that store than women. And part of it was that when you were hired, women were not trained automatically for that task, but men were, because they were seen as being more physically fit to perform that task. And so my problem with that was that specific task that favored male fitness was the only avenue to management. That's what concerned me about that. I agree with needing to know that in order to manage all of those positions, but specifically hiring women to be in a certain position that you have to finish your training and then start training on the other thing, versus men automatically training on this one thing that's a track to management. So that was my concern. But again, they didn't see that as discriminatory, because it was just, well, women don't want to learn this thing and men do.
I want to keep going with you if you're done, is because this is an example of why I am where I'm at, or where I choose not to be. Because I had the conversation of where I wanted to go with management. Now, I sure as hell know that I'm smarter than the average A, B, and C. And I'm looking at the people that are in a specific suite in my old job, and I'm like, this is the job that I want. And my manager looks at me and tells me very honestly, and we're talking about this, on the way over here, is like, you're not going to be able to get into that office. It's like, why? It's like, you don't have the cultural background that they do. I was like, well, what do you mean by that? And at the time, I was tight and tight. I was as corporate as they got.
Yeah.
Suit and tie, big blue. I mean, just Italian shoes and the whole nine. Right? I had my own pair of Bruno Malleys. So that's how bad it was. That's how bad it was. I had my own pair of Bruno Malleys, and it was straight up. You're not going to be able to get into that office. I said, what do I need to do to get into that office? And it's like, there's nothing you can do outside of being born differently. Being born differently, that's the only way you get into that office. And this is not a black man that's telling me. This is a white man who's working on his way into those offices, that is kind enough to tell me, you need to change your expectations or figure out a different route elsewhere, because that's not going to happen for you here.
You went to an Ivy League college too.
At that, yeah.
You went to Columbia.
Yeah, Columbia, and my background is actually at Harvard.
Do you know that?
Columbia and Harvard. So yeah.
Golly. Can we switch gears?
Yes.
Okay.
So in Illinois, go so these.
What YouTubers do you watch? Or what podcast do you listen to? Who is your biggest influence coming into the atheist community?
Into the atheist, into the atheist community, I want to say it was Dusty Smith, Cult of Dusty. Cult of Dusty was kind of fun for
Kind of
me.
disappeared after a while.
No, he's still around.
He's still around, but he's kind of changed his messages a little bit.
Yeah.
And I kind of like the new Dusty versus the old Dusty, or the middle
Is he
Dusty.
still doing a character, or is he
No,
just doing him?
He's doing him.
he's gone gray, so he's Dusty the White now.
Dusty the White.
Yeah,
Because he's gone completely white.
yeah. So Dusty was kind of big. Seth Andrews, the Thinking Atheist, was also somewhat big at the point, but yeah, it wasn't too many, and that's actually why I think that it's important that we get the right representation or the right message going out there in terms of atheists, because when you're a Black atheist or a minority atheist and you see specific anti-you, not anti-SJW, anti-you messages that are out there, it might really, cause you to pause and say, I want nothing to do with this community, specifically the community. And we have anti-me rhetoric, not anti-SJW. Anti-me was a lot of them out there. You just don't y'all didn't realize it until I said it. And it's like, oh no, it's like, wow, we're gonna put them on parade. I'm like, oh, go right ahead. It's like now all of a sudden everyone's like, oh my God, we have them and they've infiltrated. Yeah. It's like they've been here. They've been here.
As long as you mentioned Richard Spencer, is it ever okay to punch a Nazi?
That's a good one.
I think you and I agree on
Here
that.
we go.
So,
But no.
what is? I'm very specific on this. What do you think? What do you think?
Yeah, I kind of
think,
like to hear what you got to say.
Have we not talked about this yet?
No, I don't think we have.
I say absolutely not. For one thing, it's about dialogue rather than like letting their arguments just fall on their own versus becoming like a worse guy in that situation. But also, I think it goes back to no matter what you think, no matter what you say, you still have bodily autonomy. That physical impeding on your person, whether it's sexual, whether it's violence, I think any of that is just not necessary, especially coming from a thinking intellectual person that can think beyond that and argue beyond that. You have more to say than just the end of your fist.
I'm going to disagree with her.
Okay.
But kind of. Okay.
Right.
And kind of. First off, because I don't believe that many of the arguments that we can have with some of these people are intellectually based at all. Because what we find is that just like religion, they're emotionally rooted.
Right.
They're very much
You're not
rooted
really
in
trying to
self-interest.
convince them. Let's be honest. You're trying to convince the people that are watching you.
Agreed.
Exchange with this person.
Agreed. Which gets me to my point, which is I can't actually answer that question because I don't have the same playing field when it comes to punching Nazi. So do you honestly believe that had that been a Black Antifa member that punched Richard Spencer, that he wouldn't already been in trial? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding
Assault
me?
would be
Are you? Nah, that's
Okay,
not
so,
even
look,
funny.
Honestly,
Assault
it would
is
be a
assault.
little bit
Hold on, wait. Hold on.
catharsis.
Assault is assault.
Right.
Assault is assault. So you telling me that a black man that rapes or violates a Black woman that gets 9 years in jail versus a Stanford swimmer that gets 6 months, that assault is assault? Get the F out of here. You have got to be kidding me. Assault is not assault in the United States. Hell no effing way.
No, I'm saying in the eyes of
not
the law,
only that,
the punishments
not
are
only
disparate.
that, not only that, we have study after study, by Policy Institute, by university, even by conservative.
You're preaching to the choir, man.
That's
No, you
probably-
didn't. No,
by
but you just
conservative.
contradicted him.
That's probably also
No.
an income.
I say
So
eyes of the law.
assault is
In the
not
eyes- that's
assault.
what he's saying.
No,
In
it's
the eyes
of the
not.
law, it's not.
No, it's not.
No,
No, it's
I'm not
not.
saying
No, it's
The
the
law-
law. Much money you have to pay.
the law
Guys,
in
we're all
action.
talking. Hold on.
Okay.
One at
I'm
a
not
time,
saying the
one at a
law
time.
in action. I'm saying the law in, not the law in practice. It's the law on paper.
But why does the paper matter if it's not in action?
Well, let's start there. Assault. We're talking about
Assault is
punching
not
a
assault.
Nazi.
It's
We're
not
talking about
assault.
punching a Nazi. Yeah, but the way it's
Well,
the
he
way
is- he does equal.
the way it's
Because
prescribed.
it doesn't.
It's because we're not
Doesn't- but-
defining it
but-
the same
okay,
way.
let-
That's
let's-
why-
let-
Let's
that's why
move.
you're saying it
Let's
doesn't
move
equal-
pedantry out of this conversation for a second.
The way the offenses are prescribed based on cultural differences could or could not be. We know it is. It's prescribed differently. I'm just saying the law in and of itself is the same across the board. When you punch a Nazi, it's still assault. That's all I'm trying to say.
That's not my reality. That's I'd
Yes.
argue that it's not even.
Wait, you're saying
Assault is absolutely assault, but it's not the same when it comes.
But
But hold on,
that's-
but it's not the same
that's
in
a-
terms of
you're correct.
consequences.
Oh,
It does
no,
not. It
you're
is
right.
not the same in terms of consequences. And if you can't be intellectually honest and say that it is. So assault does not equal assault if it's 6 months and hey Billy,
But we're
you
not
have to
talking
leave
about- we're not
versus
talking about-
now. No, but we absolutely are because
Yeah.
those consequences
Yeah.
specifically
Okay, yeah.
help determine behavior.
Uh-huh.
So a white person gets to say, "Oh well, I'm gonna punch a Nazi and blah blah blah."
Ah,
I might
okay.
get
I
3
see.
weeks. I might
Yeah.
get 3
And what you're
weeks,
saying is
versus
that
a year and a
that should
half.
Result, then what you're saying then is that it should.
and this is 3 strikes out.
The slope is slippery, and that it should
It
result
should-
in more white people committing even more.
If
crime.
black people know they're going to
What?
get more, if black people,
Where
know-
did you
if-
get? How did you get
Yes,
there?
because you're saying that we're thinking it's okay to just do whatever the hell we want because we'll never get in trouble for it.
We should
Well,
be doing
what
it
do you-
more
wait,
often.
That's what you're
wait,
saying.
wait,
And
wait.
so if that's true, then it should result in more white crime, right?
Hold
More
on, I
white
need
people should be
I
committing
need a
crime.
53% intervention.
But what he's saying is that there is more to consider on his part when he's considering punching a Nazi versus you, that he has to consider a higher consequence and more. There's more to that
Because if these people
situation.
get their way, then you have a lot more at stake than I do.
Yeah,
Let's take
yeah.
the question
Well,
back
but
up
and
to
there's
the
more to
actual-
consider
Where
about
does
how
the
it
slope-
looks and all of
where does
that
the slope
versus
end?
if Jim does.
What was
How
that? What was
much
that?
of a threat
Hold
do
on.
we have to think somebody is before we say it's okay to punch them? Nazi level?
Let me reword
KKK?
it. Would you ever punch a Nazi?
Would I ever punch a Nazi?
If you knew you could totally get away with it.
That's the important question. What do you do when nobody's looking?
No
especially
one's
when
looking.
nobody's
He
looking?
didn't see you coming. Would you do it?
Would I?
Yeah.
Would I punch a Nazi?
Or if a friend of yours, would you cover for him? Or you know what I'm saying? If no,
These are
let's
the
take out the
things you
fear
tell
of
us.
retribution. Let's take out the fear of punishment.
What you're
Morally,
saying is
would
you
it be
think they
okay
deserve-
to punch a Nazi for his ideology?
Wait a minute. And I
No.
think you're ignoring the fact that I said that I can't, and that's my reality. Just like if I decide that I'm going to play basketball after hours and I get dragged into this fucking station versus my white friends who did the same thing the night before and got told to go home, the consequences are different.
Yep.
Basketball playing versus basketball isn't the same thing. And you're going to tell me to try and equate an assault versus an assault? It's not the
What if I
same.
throw in, you know you're not going to get caught?
Not the same.
No, it's not the same.
This
all right.
not the same. Now we're completely now we're just playing. I mean, do I exist? Do I not exist? Do you exist? How do you know you exist? Can you convince me
Then
that
you're really
you
sitting there.
actually
No,
exist?
That's a presupposition in and of itself.
You don't have to
We could be in the damn Matrix.
Oh man.
We presuppose we're sitting here and not in some basement of a hyper intelligent
It is-
14-year-old.
It is
Yeah.
reasonable to believe that which is true.
Yeah. Well, Occam's razor.
Is that
Yeah,
where
we
we're going?
exist.
What?
Anyway.
That's not Occam's razor.
Well, the simplest explanation is that we exist.
That's a bastardization of it. The actual
I'm not drinking enough.
what Occam actually said
You want
was
some more?
You in, but
You need more?
the knowledge we have to base the least amount of presuppositions on.
I'm not
is
taking a
probably
sip
the
until
best
you're done.
knowledge.
Oh, I see.
You know what I'm saying?
There's no way.
They take me all day. I sip very slowly.
Anyway,
Okay.
so
Mark just asked, would it be moral for a white person to punch a Nazi? That's a good,
I still
good-
say no.
good twist.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
I would agree with that.
Because a Christian can make the same argument about an atheist, is that in at least in Nazism, your terror ends at death. But
Well.
with an atheist, if you are spreading this idea that eternity doesn't matter, then you are jeopardizing not only the life of someone, of your children, but the eternal life of your children, and that's more dangerous than what any
this is
Nazi
all
can
just
do in a
dress
lifetime.
rehearsal, right?
That's what I'm
According
saying.
to
Is that if you are physically assaulting someone that's completely unprovoked,
that's less
based-
serious than
based
fucking with
on
somebody's
based on
afterlife
something they
proposition.
believe, and again, a Nazi for me is a victim of their ideology.
Ugh.
Is
There's
the
some
ideology?
probably some pretty evil Nazis.
Yeah. What I'm
around.
saying is that they
Define
may
evil.
be exactly they may
I don't
be
think it's
bad
worse than
people.
agencies.
They may be people in other ways, but based on what they believe
Yeah.
about themselves being victims,
Yeah,
about
you
their
definitely
culture,
convince somebody of that. You have
Yeah,
to convince somebody
you
of
are
that if they're not
taken
just
in by
gonna
this
believe it.
idea. And do they? I don't understand why that would even be a debate about physically assaulting someone based on what they think, what they believe. Now, if they are spouting something
If they're inciting
that's
violence, they
inciting
definitely have to take
violence,
it down.
that may be a different conversation.
Wait,
But
it is.
I
Define inciting violence.
If you actually
Exactly.
call to have
How do you
somebody
define it?
have violence committed on another human being
How about
in your
genocide?
presence.
How about genocide? We should kill all Jews, blacks, trans, gays. How about that?
Yeah, I don't think it's an incitement to violence. I don't think you're genuinely going like, hey, starting right now, go out there and find the first people you can and just,
Yeah, he's great.
kill them. That's not what that is. They're saying that in our ideology, yeah, there's this thing where we fucking don't think that anybody else should be living except fucking blue-eyed, blonde-haired white people. And that is shitty. It is a shitty way to think about the
Especially when you're not blonde.
I have the blue eyes. I
But-
don't have the blonde hair. I'm
but-
Italian. My ancestors came here in the 1900s. So.
You have hair. You're prejudiced against us bald people.
Yeah, I'm feeling a little.
Yeah, I know, right? I'd rather-
around you.
But I think that ideology is based on misinformation
Yes.
about evolution
Right.
versus eugenics, and eugenics being that people. This may not be.
This
completely-
is great. No, this is a wonderful.
but yeah,
Yeah.
but basically
segue.
that the difference between like evolution is about passing physical traits through generations. With gene- wait, please. And eugenics is about this idea of personality characteristics and character
Mhm.
characteristics being passed on through genes as well. So the mistake is made where you add that in eugenics, which is terrible, terrible science.
Mhm.
And what the Nazi Party may have been other things as well, but what they believed in terms of eugenics was that if you filter out the physical characteristics, you will
Right.
also filter out character flaws. And so those character flaws will not be a detriment in the society in the future. So you're creating a better utopian society
Right.
in the future. And so that's what I think is
flawed.
dangerous about,
Yeah, utopia.
but it's only flawed because the science is bad. They don't know that is
Mhm.
bad.
Yeah.
So if that's true, if that were true, then they would be following a higher
yeah,
goal and a higher morality based on what's best in the future.
Right. But this
And
is-
that's what's so terrifying about the potential of ideology, is that if you are basing your morality and what is moral, you can justify anything in this life if it benefits a future life and if
Well,
it benefits future generations.
It's one of the perfect examples of how like ends don't always justify a means.
No, but that's the point, is that it may, if
It
that were
may,
true.
but
If
we
that
don't
were
wanna
true.
Think about it. I mean, I don't think as human beings we even want to think about what that.
But well,
I
but
think-
that's
but I think we
that's
do.
what
I
they
think
had
we-
to.
yes,
Well,
yes, I think we do.
couple that with dehumanizing these groups in Nazi Germany, and that's what's so for me, that's what's so terrifying about ideology versus reason and
That's kinda my
information.
thing is
is-
like,
yeah.
didn't freaking Nazis really? Didn't they all die in like the 40s and shit?
But
Like,
when you
really
put-
Nazis,
Yeah.
When you put a bike,
They're-
when you put a bike lock in a sock
They're
and you
just
hit someone on the
hold on.
nose,
Like there aren't still Nazis. Like
Hold on. Oh, no.
well, Nazi's a political party.
As a
There's
political
technically
party,
not
as a
Right,
Nazis.
political
right.
party.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Pedantry.
Democratic
Pedantry.
Socialist Workers
Pedantry.
Party of
Pedantry.
Germany. That's a Nazi.
Pedantry.
Yeah,
Pedantics.
we're talking
What
about
does that
yeah.
mean?
Words.
It's just-
Dicing words.
It's pedantics.
It's pedantics. So
I don't
so
understand
this
what
is-
you guys are saying about they're not.
Right.
You're a
learned.
So-
stickler about the rules of how things are
Right,
talked
right.
about.
So this is something.
Sorry.
Yes.
Go
So
ahead.
this is an argument. This is argument that I've even had, and I swear it was actually almost amusing if it wasn't so sad. Is I had this thought of a guy being pulled, and because this is where we are in American politics, is a guy being pulled off of a General Lee's horse, being dragged off the horse, right, the statue, and by guys screaming Sig Heil with the swastika, screaming, "They're still not Nazis! They're still not Nazis!" Because that's where we actually are. Because we're arguing that no, they're not Nazis. Okay, sure, they're not Nazis as in the German political force, the political party. But we've got neo-Nazis,
Right.
American Confederate Nazis, and everything in between. So because
Well, I
we're
would define
not,
it as adhering to that ideology.
it doesn't.
It doesn't matter.
Well, we're just quibbling over
Really?
semantics.
Exactly,
It's-
it is
Like
all
define-
semantics.
They espouse
Nazi.
everything.
All
They
semantics.
espouse everything the Nazi Party stood for.
That's what
We
I
and
mean.
then some, and then some,
We're just
and then
we're
some.
just trying to be literal.
Yeah,
You can't.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
a political
And then some.
They
party.
take it
So
further,
anyway,
It is
Yeah.
exactly. So it's how do we expand exactly? So and I could actually see many Americans that don't fit, and this is the problem with, and maybe I'm just too much of a pragmatist. It's like I could see many of you guys getting dragged off to certain places and going on certain trips, and y'all are screaming, "They're still not Nazis," while you're being dragged to the same
that's
places
one outcome.
that I'm.
And if you want to keep punching Nazis and put a bike lock in a sock and hit them in the nose during a live broadcast, you just continue to empower them. The best way to fight bad words is with good words. If you want to keep
That's also
empowering
not
them,
true. Hold on, wait a minute. That's also not true.
we will just
That-
mock them out of
that-
existence, won't we?
Whoa, yeah, because that's how it's ever worked. That's how it's worked. So what we'll say? What we'll say is we'll call a racist a racist, and then next thing we know they'll vote for Trump. Because that's what happened.
Fucker, you win.
I know.
Wait, what?
I'm out. No, shut up.
I tap out. No, go ahead. Tap out. So
Well, yeah,
if
man.
so
Trump said it all.
So-
The people have spoken.
exactly. So if he's actually being a racist and having bad ideas, and I call him out by saying, "God damn it, Jim, you're a racist,"
But you don't do it.
what
like that.
actually
Yeah,
happened?
you don't
What?
do it with
outrage
labeling,
to
you do it by
Yeah, you do it
deconstructing
with
your
reasoned
argument.
arguments. Virtue signal and go, "Oh, I'm so much better. I'm so much not a piece of shit as you."
But
are."
it's not
Don't
virtue
do it
signaling.
like
No,
that.
hold on.
Mhm.
Calling someone out
Yeah.
specifically on
No,
their
you can do
actions,
that, but it's just not
specifically,
gonna help.
is of course that's not going to help because people entrench in their own ideologies,
Yeah, well, yeah.
right? And everything that they seek is confirming those ideologies.
Well, we already said earlier too that we're also not doing it really for their benefit. We're doing it for the benefit of the conversation that's being looked at in general.
And you calling them a racist is going to perpetuate their self-identification as a victim.
Yes,
That's
Yeah.
a good point. She makes a good point.
whether it is or isn't.
I thought
true.
that was the point you guys were making.
No,
but
well,
I'm
yeah,
just-
in a way
I
that
was
actually
just
just kind of adds
articulating
to it. That yeah,
I
I
was
mean,
going to
Yeah.
eventually get
yeah. Well,
there.
Curveball. Here we go.
What?
Name the biggest thing we could do as an atheist, as in the atheist community to. We know there's divisiveness right now, worse
It's
than
always
ever.
been there.
Yeah, I think it's worse than ever.
It's
We
always
talked
been
about
there.
it in the car on the way here.
No. You all are now seeing it and saying it's
Okay,
worse
okay,
than ever.
okay.
I think
But
it maybe
sure as hell,
includes-
I've seen it.
What can we do to bring us all back?
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
Is the divisiveness including more people now? Like, is that the difference?
maybe it just seems like more
Yeah.
divisiveness because
That-
there's a bigger group.
Right?
Yeah.
Bing, bing, bing.
Is that right?
like the
Bing.
divisiveness
There we go.
existed, but
There we
it's
go.
that more people
There we
are
go.
getting on both sides.
Why aren't there more
numbers-
females
In what?
Women,
in the atheist
right?
community?
Yes.
Why aren't there more females in the atheist community? They're out there. Why don't they join?
Why aren't there more black people in the
I don't
atheist
know.
community?
What did Britt say? Something. What?
Why aren't there more black people?
Well,
Oh, we know why.
Why?
You want to say it or me?
No, go ahead. I want to.
The black community is more entrenched in pious Christian evangelical thought, and it's harder to break out of the
it's really
the
well compartmentalized
religious
if that's the
mindset.
case.
because it was forced into their heads, and
Well,
it's
you
harder
did
to get
say,
out
well,
of.
you
I've
did
always
say
kinda
that
wondered
the
about that
population
too, like-
demographic of black people in the atheist
Not even
community
close.
is
I'm not even
is
close,
it
really.
representative?
All right.
Well, what is your? That's something that I wanted to ask today.
Here's
I got to hear this.
Here's the question: why aren't more black atheists not only represented or more visible or want to be part of the atheist community?
Want to? Okay, man, that's
So
a
it's on
huge
us to
mouthful.
want
Which
to-
one?
It's on us to attract minority atheists, right?
I mean, because
There's fewer out
because-
there to choose from. First off,
true, that's absolutely true.
Yeah, we don't have
That's
a lot. We don't have a big
absolutely
pool.
true.
there's not a big
But
pool, yeah.
but one is absolutely true. There's a smaller pool, but two, no, you don't have a small pool, or you have a smaller pool. That's
Well,
that's
yeah, what's
relative.
represented to us is a small
Right.
pool, but it may not be as small as
It's not. We're growing, but
Right.
you all tend to exclude the type of conversation. And how are you doing that?
What I miss it.
But
Ooh, that.
what I deal with
Everybody okay?
with the minimization of the actual issues that I deal with, telling me that although you've been talking about white identity politics for years, now all of a sudden that I want to talk about my specific identity, that's all of a sudden divisive. That's a big one. When I talk about the issues that impact my life, because it still doesn't happen in the US, it happens other places in the world.
Yeah.
People don't pull me over and ask me for my baptismal certificate. Are you Christian? Are you Christian? That's not why I'm getting pulled over in the United States. That's not why I'm getting pulled over. When I want to talk about the issues that are very specific to me as an individual, you ignore that or you dismiss that. You want to try and use statistics that you yourselves don't actually understand within the context of America, where you have not done any of the actual research, even as you tout yourself as critical thinkers, as the more educated, the elite. You refuse to actually do the research that's associated with my identity. And yet you want to ask the question, why aren't I part of you? Where the question is,
It's not asked with a longing. It's just asked as a question.
Mine was purely
It has
a
a
conjecture.
it has a
I'm
question.
I
purely
think it's
speculating.
a matter-
It's not based on any stats.
I know.
It's also
I'm
a
just
matter.
guessing.
I know.
And
It's
if
al-
I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
I know,
Guys,
Jim. I know, Jim.
It's also a matter of trying
Well, tell
to
us.
set priorities. You know, like what is
My
the
exist-
most important thing to focus
Survival?
on for
Survival.
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 All right.
Survival. Survival.
All right.
Number one, survival.
Survival.
Tell us.
Tell
I
us
just
that.
answered it.
Tell us that.
What
That's your
number
number
one?
one priority.
My one number one priority is survival. Number two
But
is trying to strive. Number three is not dealing with the cultural baggage that comes with America. Number four is everything that you as an individual deal with on a daily basis. Guess what? I deal with the same shit too.
Is it your own, not you, someone still in the atheist closet, right? Is it their own community that they're more afraid of? Or the community at large?
What do you mean?
like
You
okay,
said
say it's
survival.
like a black,
I want-
For a black atheist to come
Mm.
out, is he more afraid of his family and his church and his community? Or is he more afraid of society? Oh, I'm black now, I'm a fucking atheist. Which,
Which is worse?
Which one
yeah,
is
which
worse?
is worse?
Oh wow. Black now I'm an atheist.
Now,
Black
they're gonna
now
see
I'm
me
an
as black,
atheist.
now they're gonna see me as
Because not only
atheist
am I
too.
black, but
So
now
Black now I'm an
Now I'm
atheist.
double fucked.
Yeah, black now I'm an
Not that-
atheist.
Really?
and it's
Black
not-
now
that's
I'm an
what you choose?
atheist. Black now that I'm an atheist.
And it's never the well, what am I going to be called?
Because it still comes to group dynamics and the numbers. There is strength in numbers.
Yeah.
And me being a Black Christian, talking about civil rights issues, talking about inequality or inequity, I've got a much bigger number to draw from versus me being a Black atheist with no backing from my atheist community, my humanist community, maybe.
Preeminently persecuted as a Black atheist, more so than as a Black Christian.
Right, but I don't actually believe that I am part of a victimhood culture.
Good.
That is a good. I think that's an important mentality to try to hang on to.
Yeah, it's
but
it's
like up.
Well,
like Milo is a gay Republican, or Larry Elder is a Black conservative. You know, just being
Milo's
that
a
purple
gay
squirrel.
Republican Catholic.
Yeah, just being that purple
Jokes
squirrel,
about
that fictional character, that can be a leg up though sometimes, right? You're that severe minority.
I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true.
Notoriety?
Not notoriety.
I don't think that's true.
You have a voice. Look at me. You know?
Okay.
You think Milo, if he wasn't gay, would be half as popular? I think that lends a lot of it.
No, I don't
They
think he
can't
would
shit
be.
on him as much as they want to because he's part of the LGBT community. So they go,
But he's not.
Supposedly.
He's in opposition to it.
I don't know.
What do you mean he's an opposite? He just got married.
Yes, and he
Yeah,
made
but
a
he's
very
still-
very ardent statement that he's anti-gay marriage.
Yeah, that's what I'm confused about.
Yeah.
What-
that's confusing.
Contradiction.
Yeah.
Well,
Why
most of
hasn't
us,
anybody
hold on,
asked him about
but
that?
most of us are walking contradictions.
Oh, well.
Most of us.
Most of us?
Inside our-
Most of us?
Not most.
I try to, well.
I try to play it the way I say it.
Mhm.
I mean,
You think that's true?
Authenticity.
try to. Anyway.
You have Black atheist as your walking contradiction, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to change that though.
Oh, okay. Hang on.
So like live?
I think
Yeah.
it's still up.
Courtney, what are we going to talk about?
Emerson said, I
Did
can
you
say
guys
multitude.
settle?
Why you and I hate women.
Did you guys settle the question about why we hate women?
I don't know why he was saying that.
No, he was being facetious.
I know, but
What?
I hate them for the same reason you do.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Oh, they said, someone said, at least we can all agree that punching a Nazi is funny.
I would say
Counterproductive.
exactly. I was just gonna say that.
Counterproductive.
Counterproductive. Yeah, definitely.
Where's your I'll show you. You guys?
TJ.
Okay,
Yes.
Courtney.
You got one, don't you?
What's up?
We gotta keep this show going.
Wait. So okay. Okay. I didn't
Figure it
know.
out.
Oh, let's go.
Oh,
Let's see.
say.
This will be a good chance to.
Figure it out.
You did.
Thank you.
It's funny, men want a male doctor for the cough, but not a male aide to bathe them when they are in a nursing home. I don't know if that's true or not. Anything? Upper body strength is also important for aides in a nursing home, yet most are female. That's an interesting
That's
point.
True.
And nurses have the back injury rights to
Hmm.
show that's an issue.
Yeah.
Well, and I
Could
kinda
we?
wanted
Were
to
we able to
clarify
hear that, everybody?
Yeah,
it was from our audience, our
Yeah.
studio audience. So it was
Yeah.
the
levels are good.
nurses' injury rate
back
will actually
injury
show
rate.
back injuries quite a bit.
Does that speak for or against females even being nurses' aides?
And is that female centric or does that happen with male nurses also?
Oh, good point.
That was
But
the
if you're
point. The
more-
point was
if you're
is
in
that
better shape than
female.
you have- what?
The point was that the audience made is that female centric or is that specific? Yeah, is it?
Well, it
is
might.
just as
From
prominent
my
among
knowledge,
men?
It has to do more to overwork. Women, nurses of every sex have tools to help them with that, but often they're pressured. You can't use that tool. It takes too long.
There's a trade-off. The women.
Well,
may
that's
be
the accommodations right there.
worse backs, but they are more empathetic with the patients. That's what
Okay. You say females naturally have more empathy?
well, what I've seen.
Oof.
Ooh.
You know, my
How is that an
I don't know about
ooh?
that.
I don't. What?
What did I miss?
You said oof. He said ooh.
I know.
What did I miss? What did I miss?
Do women have more empathy?
There was a comment online about
Female
caregivers
Oh,
having to
no.
lift their patients out of bathtubs and things, and that's more prominent among women than men for filling that role. And they were comparing that to what we were talking about with firefighters. But what was said that made us disagree just now?
If female caregivers are experiencing more physical problems when they like pull their big patient out of a tub and they get back problems. If a female, so if the sexual dimorphism is into play here,
Okay.
and we're talking males might be inherent. Just a hypothesis, males might be inherently better able to care for patients in, say, a hospice or,
Well, I think that's a conflation of whether they can lift them versus whether they can be an appropriate caregiver in general.
but if you can't meet
but
all
also-
the physical requirements of the job,
That's the question: is should that be a requirement of the job?
pulling
If-
someone out of a bathtub.
If there are like Mark was just saying, if there are tools that can help you do that, but it's frowned upon to use them because they take more time, is that something that should be looked at? But now, in terms of like women being physically typically not as fit as men for certain jobs, I don't know if this would apply, but in terms of being a person with a cognitive disability, for me, there are certain jobs that will outright reject me if they know that I have that, because of the route that I have to go through HR to give them my diagnosis and have accommodations brought down that are reasonable. But just the action of me going to HR after hiring and having accommodations brought down, they will find a reason to fire me because they will find that to be me going over my management's head. Especially in sales. And so that's what's scary to me, is that in certain fields, like in academics, many people are going to be more accommodating to things like my disability and my accommodations than fields that are a little bit more cutthroat, like maybe law or sales or medical field. Even though medical field includes mental health, but it makes the system of the workforce naturally discriminatory anyway, even though there are accommodations. But I was just wondering if that's particularly generalizable to women with the physical aspect in the workforce.
That's a good question. Could be. Yeah, I haven't experienced it, so I can't speak to it.
It's interesting.
Well, but you do.
I work
I
work in a field that seems to be very dominated by women. So
Okay.
Pharmacy. Yeah, pharmaceuticals.
I used to listen to I
Lesbian
do.
women.
Really? Lesbian?
At least
I
like
know
2 or 3 of the pharmacists that I work with.
I listen.
I was like a liquor to business.
One of the things that I do in general, and this is within the atheist community and everything else out there, is and I don't think anyone could argue that I am not manly, or I don't, because some things you just are going to inherit.
Yeah, man, I'm jealous of it.
Right. I was just like you a little bit. No. Is one of the things that I learned very early on in life is listen to the women. I don't care how sexist you believe that is. Listen to the women, because the women are always going to tell you something that you need to pay attention to. And my mother was a nurse, and she was a nursing aide first, and then she was a nurse. And I came from a very matriarchal background. My mom, my grandmother, my aunts were very prominent in my life. Women surrounded me all the time. And the one thing that they always told me was listen, listen, listen. Listen first. You can have your opinion, but listen first. And some of the stories that I heard from them, I still hear today is, when it comes to the discomfort of caring for male patients, or male patients with things like Alzheimer's or various dementias that are caused by different sources, and the lines that are consistently crossed all across the board. It's they have a story to tell, and sometimes it's told almost in silence. Listen to the women first. Always listen to the women.
Why do you think that's a thing?
Why that's a thing? Because my mom, even when this was 30, 40 years ago, she would talk about she's trying to take care of a male patient, and the male patient has a flashback or decides that he's going to grab and grope and what have you. And okay, then what does she have to deal with? Well, she could file a complaint, but then the question is, so are you saying that you're incapable of taking care of this male patient?
Right.
Do you really not like your job? Do you really believe that you are centered in care enough to not dismiss this, because this is just a reality of just dealing with.
If that's
with
unavoidable, then
if it's unavoidable,
then are you still willing to fulfill the requirements of the job? Yeah.
Well, not only that, are the question of your commitment or your qualification comes into play. And doctors are not nurses, but nurses also have an oath to care. And quite often it is often dismissed when it comes to the role of male patients versus bodily autonomy. So it always and those subsequent boundaries that just come there. Again, we talk about cultural norms and what's expected versus not. So if we're going to use, and I think this is always important, yes, I think the minority voice is very important when measuring, if we're going to do a canary test, whether it's the atheist community or other communities. I think it's always important to listen to the women, because they got a whole lot to tell us.
Do you all have any saved rounds? Any other questions?
Any what?
Do you have any questions saved for them?
No. Did you get to ask?
Hell no. There's about 3 days worth of questions.
Yeah, we got
right.
tons.
I told him, I was like, this could be a 12-hour podcast.
Well, I'm going to give you the opportunity now before I keep in. I don't want to keep firing away.
I'm going to say, because he mentioned, he's like, well, let's talk about black on black crime. It was like, well, if we're going to talk about black on black crime, we might as well talk about white on white crime, and why white men decide that they want to take out a gun and decide that they're going to start shooting in crowds and theaters and shit like that. And when in reality, when we talk about black on black crime specifically, if we're going to do anything else, when we talk about homicide specifically, intraracial versus interracial crime is almost negligible when it comes to the comparison. We're talking about 90-some-odd% versus 87%, something like that. So blacks commit crimes, especially when we start looking at homicides versus white committing crimes against versus white homicides. And then, of course, you have the population demographics. So when people start saying, well, what about black on black crime? It's like, you're obviously not being intellectually honest when it comes to the conversation. Nice red herring. Next. If you really want to talk about crime and population demographics, we also need to talk about the resources that are associated with those population demographics, which can also be extrapolated across racial lines. Again, if you are or consider yourself a critical thinker, a free thinker, or more intelligent than the other average thinker, you got to bring that shit to me as well. Again, why not everyone should be talking about race. Because if you won't read a Bible when you argue against a Christian,
I haven't read the entire Bible.
So have I. So have I. And that's the only reason that I will debate a Christian. This is the only reason why I'll debate a Christian on the Bible. If you're not going to actually take at least one African American studies course, or at least understand African American studies courses in the context of American politics or African American cultural demographics, don't tell me that you're honestly going to talk about race. You ain't qualified.
This is the violent crime stats.
Oh yeah.
Now,
well,
I'm not going to put anything into
this
this.
ties in
I
with
know.
the black on black.
Yeah. So we're not going to talk about black on black crime, but let's talk about black on black
You brought
crime.
it up, Alex.
No,
But I have a perfectly justified explanation for this, and it does not involve melanin content of the skin, if you want to hear it. But the reason why 8% black men commit 35% of the violent crimes, which that's in and of itself just sounds racist as hell, doesn't it? It's income level. You
and I had this conversation. You and I had this conversation in the car. So
I'm only 5 generations.
I'm
away
giving you
from-
giving you a shield. I'm extending my shield to him. So yeah.
Shield.
Yes, he gets the the anti-racial shield right there. Because he and I had this conversation.
All right.
The reality is
poverty.
you're dealing with.
Okay, so how do you
poverty.
fix this?
How do you fix it?
How do you fix it?
Okay,
That's what I always
step
I want
one.
solutions.
Step one is you have got to figure out within white America how to disassociate race and crime, race and class.
Class.
I
has
dare
a lot
you.
to do with it,
I
too.
dare you. I dare you. Right? And this is when people, critical race theories. Oh, it's fuck bullshit. It's like,
Class is
okay,
based on
Look,
income level.
I grew up in a trailer park.
class. Right. So growing up I would have this with my old podcasting friend who would argue, well, I grew up in a racial
I can relate on that.
Totally. Would you trade your spot as a white woman in America with a black woman in America?
If I could check that box.
The fact that she didn't say, oh hell yes, I want.
I don't see them in any kind of privileged position in any way.
Exactly.
I don't.
Okay, so I'm gonna hit the pause button for you there because
Yes.
I know that's an unfair question because it's a question that's been asked before, which is even if you are financially underprivileged, would you take the underprivilege of a specific race and adopt that as your own identity? Would you trade that?
I don't think I would.
No, of course not.
No.
Of course not. And the reality is, as much as we want to talk about, it's a class thing. It's a class thing, right? And I love the cultural Marxist references that I always get, right? And it's like, yeah. So would you really trade your position with me? And the answer is no, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. Because wait, hold on. Wait. Atheist celebrity that deals with more hate mail.
I still would take
No, you wouldn't.
Bullshit.
Because I'm gonna tell you right. I'm gonna tell you right now that the very first
No, not just hate mail.
death threats.
It's violent threats. Dude, you listen to this.
The violent threats. The comments about my children being raped, my daughters being raped.
That's disgusting.
Okay. So do you really believe that you would take that on? And not to even mention,
Not voluntarily, no.
not to mention that the only reason this doesn't feed me. Atheism doesn't feed me. Atheism doesn't generate this atheism celebrity doesn't generate any real income for me. I have a job. I have a real job that generates real money that this actually detracts from. This cost me money. This costs me money.
Do you
Yeah.
have
On a
Well,
daily-
it
No, I
narrows
do not
your-
have a Patreon. I
Well,
do.
There's a start.
Right. I don't have a Patreon.
We got 3 patrons.
I
that
you there you go. You have more patrons than me. Right. So I don't have a Patreon. And when I write, yes, I write for a profit-based company, Patheos or The Orbit. But the reality is I get so much hate mail from so many atheists when it comes to that, because those are the majority of my readers.
Yeah.
Right. That I'm like, do I really want to devote that time to that, or do I want to have conversations with people, even if it's interfaith discussions, because I find myself falling into the world of humanism first, because I give a shit about people, right?
Yeah, I do too.
Right, and I will go as far to say is I give a shit about people so much that I look at my W-2s every year and I say, I could really not give a shit about people. I could totally not give a shit about people. Because I'm in that world. I could not give a shit.
Well, I think a lot of people take
and
that
do
leap
really well.
in the atheist movement. I think that a lot of people decide. It's me, myself, and I.
In fact, I'm Thomas Sowell's model minority. Specifically, I am Thomas Sowell's model minority.
Oh no.
What is that?
First generation.
Yeah.
First
What
generation.
is that?
I am a byproduct of an immigrant household.
Oh yeah.
Not
You guys came from where?
from Haiti.
Haiti.
From Haiti.
Oh, you speak Creole. That's right. I saw in your bio.
I speak French and Creole.
I was about to say you speak French.
What did you?
French, Creole, and Spanish.
I got tons of questions. if you
Okay,
guys wanna
I was
throw one
gonna
out,
bring
though.
up the.
I was gonna go
the
Evergreen
Obama
State
quote.
College,
I don't do ever.
but it's
Okay.
It's not specifically Evergreen.
I
It's something that
understand.
happened
I
at
understand if he wants to avoid the evergreen. I mean, well,
So the problem with Evergreen is there's so much that's misunderstood with Evergreen, and there's so much disinformation with Evergreen, and it happens to be an exceptional case.
But this is a
with
question that's
Evergreen.
only loosely related to it.
Go for it.
Okay, so the play that it was based on was the Day of Absence, Day of Presence.
Mhm.
That's why all
and
black
which
people,
was okay,
originally it was all black people leaving campus
right?
as a show of what would you do without us?
Solidarity.
Because
Show
the play is based
solidarity.
on the play is put on by black people in whiteface, because all the black people disappeared from this town, and what would the day be like without black people? That's the play that it's based on. My question to you is a play in reverse where everyone's in white people in blackface putting on a similar something that had to do with having to be in blackface. Would that be equally okay?
Well, this is when we get into we so don't have anywhere near the amount of time to get into that.
Sarah
But-
Silverman is my hero.
This is where we generally get into the conversation of
Have you seen
punching
her
up,
do blackface in her
versus
Punching
program?
down.
Oh,
and this is where I tend to end the conversation
she
punching
does
up
it in just the right
versus
way.
punching down.
If there is one.
If there is such a thing as a right way to do that.
Yeah,
Have you seen Sarah Silverman's blackface
Oh my God.
episodes?
If it exists
Have you seen them?
somehow,
Yes,
even
I have.
somehow.
Oh,
Yes.
Sarah Silverman program, everybody.
Yeah.
Okay. If she's a Jew, she can get away with
Is
it.
that why?
Oh, so now you're bringing up the Jewish question.
Now
He's bringing up the Jewish question. He's bringing. Not only do you not like black people, you have the Jewish question that you're posing.
Last episode, TJ's last episode on Atheist Edge.
it was a memorable experience.
Okay,
and
so
we never saw him again after that.
punching up, punching down. Okay.
I remember that conversation
I
with
get
you.
it.
Was
So I mean, really, I mean, do you want to talk about 80% of the population?
I'm not finishing that sentence.
Are we going to give some poetic license? Let's say,
You want to talk about poetic license?
not that I ever want to go to a play where someone's wearing whiteface or black.
Go ahead and tell the audience about Evergreen. Go ahead.
Okay.
Okay.
Brett
go for it.
Weinstein
Yeah, I'm
is
not really clear on
professor.
what
He and his wife, I think it was his wife also. So there's a tradition at Evergreen State College and other colleges where Am I getting
Is the audio picking up on this?
Yeah.
Okay.
My voice carries.
All right.
Once a year, all the black people leave school for a day. It's called Day of Absence, Day of Presence. This year, a newsletter, a mass email went out saying, hey, we're going to flip scripts. We're going to switch it up. All white people get off. It's going to.
But you're talking that way.
The microphone's over here.
Sorry.
You're see the back.
It's just getting all the echo. Yeah,
All right, yeah, sure. We're going to flip the scripts. All white people are encouraged to leave if you're an ally. And if you're not, you're either with us or you're against us. First problem I have with this. And so the day comes, Brett Weinstein and his wife, specifically Brett Weinstein, just kept teaching class. White, well, I think he's Jewish, actually, but he got ganged.
Are you saying because of his last name, he's got to be Jewish?
No, I just no.
Why
I've
look
heard
at me? Why
I've heard
I
some
gotta
podcasts.
be a non-Jew?
Oh my God.
Yeah, so yeah, just get on YouTube and look at the resulting backlash that followed. I mean, he was shouted down. At one point, there was literally mobs in the parking lot looking for his car. Security, he got off the campus, and I think that was the last time he was ever allowed back on the campus. He didn't get fired, he just quit. But yeah, so much backlash after that.
He got death threats too, though, didn't he?
Yeah.
Because he
refused to leave on the day of absence.
Yeah.
He was
Right.
white and he refused to leave the
He's
campus.
also Jewish.
And every time he tried to open his mouth, you don't get to talk. This is our time to talk.
Mhm.
You don't get a voice.
So
yeah, he has
so-
a history too.
Like
So,
no, like everyone's
because-
voice is not equally valid.
right, because that is so much the norm across the United States, right? Because white men in general don't get a voice in Congress, don't get a voice in politics, don't get a voice in everything else. Please go ahead. You're making a point.
Okay, true. But does that mean me, some lowly in the far reaches of the YouTube?
No, you voted for
universe
Trump.
on-
Yeah.
on a-
No, I mean, come on.
Does that just because Congress is white?
Trump.
power.
Go ahead.
White,
Trump.
So that means me, my lowly.
Trump.
I don't get the voice. I don't get.
You totally got a voice. It's Trump. Go ahead. But go right ahead.
Because what it sounds like, though, when you start saying stuff like that, is you have too much of a voice. We're not going to be happy until you don't have one anymore.
Oh no!
That's
You
what it
totally.
feels like.
Hold on.
That's
That's what it feels like. But is that what it is?
I don't know. Tell me.
Hold on, no. That's what it feels like. Hold on.
No, these are important conversations.
He makes an extraordinarily valid point. That's what it feels like. But is that what it is?
That's what you're saying.
No. It doesn't matter what I say. I only represent 13% of the population, and that's actually not the number. That's not the number.
3% of it?
That's not the number. You're actually closer to, majority. So you're telling me by your actions what you actually feel. And given that you voted for Trump,
They didn't vote for Trump, guys.
Doesn't matter.
Don't.
Hold on.
If
If you're gonna hold me responsible or accountable for a demographic, I'm gonna fucking hold you accountable
That's
for
what
the
he's saying,
same thing.
Yeah.
You voted for Trump.
Back to the original point, though. Why should that crowd tell Brett Weinstein to shut up? It's our turn to talk. He had to explain himself why he was still on campus.
You know what? Hold on. Everyone.
We're gonna have you back on.
Hold on.
Look at the camera and say, I'm coming back.
I'm coming back on. Hold on. You know what?
We have so much more to
I
cover.
I know, right?
I understand. And yes, you voted for Trump. Hold on. I understand.
For him. You voted
I understand.
For Trump. Just
You voted
accept
for
it.
Trump.
Accept it.
I understand. And yes, we need to have further conversations because we do need to address the white male ego. We do need to address the victimhood of the white male majority. Absolutely. I understand that. We, 13% of African Americans who hold no political influence, no financial influence, need to somehow make amends. Here, I'll take your hand.
The thing
Give
is,
me a hand. No.
what's weird
No.
though
Give me a
is
hand.
somehow
Give me a
you're
no.
outrageous.
Give me a
You're
hand.
outrageous
Give
proportional
me
somehow.
your
Do
hand.
you
Give
need
me
a
your
woman?
hand.
Do you need a
Give
woman?
me your
Do
hand.
you need a woman?
Give me
Do you
man.
need a woman
We're
to
gonna,
come
we're
in?
having a kumbaya moment. Will you join? Will you join? Will you join? We're having a kumbaya moment. Will you? Yes. We will find a way. We'll find a way.
What?
Away from.
You're not getting a deep tongue test.
Oh my God. Wait.
Way to make it awkward.
Okay, but can you articulate?
You didn't
that?
solve anything. You didn't solve anything.
This show solves stuff. How many shows bring SJWs and anti-SJWs together?
Oh no!
Who you calling
I'm not talking
SJW?
about like overall.
Wait, hold on. Wait, who you calling SJW?
You two, I would call SJAs because SJW is a pejorative.
He's name
I'm
calling.
SJ.
What does that mean?
Social justice advocates.
What is
I'm
that
a
You are
justice
SJAs.
advocate.
We are anti-SJAs.
I don't know what that means.
You're kind of, yeah.
I don't know what that means.
What does
Can you
that
define
mean?
that
Could you
and why
define
would
that?
do
Identity
that?
politics and social justice.
I don't
What do you
hate-
mean?
I don't
What
hate
do you-
we are.
what do you
I
mean by
just
identity
have my own
politics?
opinion.
That's what we've been talking about for the last
Is it?
2 hours and 45 minutes.
Okay, so
What?
so anything that's not white male associated is identity politics.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
You got
what's okay?
You're right.
What are you defining it as?
Okay. Are you proud of being a female?
Proud?
Does it give you some
Proud
sense of pride?
Oh,
This is the best way I can.
Whoa.
This is the best way I can do this. Does being a white female give you some sense?
This
of
is how
pride?
we're hold on. This is how we're going out, folks. This is
Not
how
gonna-
we're going out. This is
Not-
how we're this
not
is
with a bang,
this
but with
is-
a whimper.
well, this is how we're ending this. All right. You're gonna have to come back for the rest of this.
Everything's okay.
We're so
Everything's
gonna
okay.
have to come back to the end of it. Yes.
Does you being a white female give you any sense of pride?
Tell her 53%. Call it a 53%. You gotta call it a 53%. 53%. It was
Just say no, Courtney.
53% of white women
That's an
voted for
accident of
Trump.
your birth. I don't-
So, I mean, if you're gonna dig
I mean,
deep,
like, I don't say white or black, but I'm a
Dig
light-skinned
deeper.
male
dig
that voted
deep,
for Hillary
dig deep.
Clinton. Clinton.
Dude, commit,
Seriously.
commit,
You
commit.
can be proud.
Anyway, what I'm saying is,
You can be happy that you are female, but to be proud of an accident of your birth. it just
accident
doesn't
of birth.
really doesn't make
Right.
any sense.
Even atheism. We can't choose to be atheist or Christian. Yeah.
Wait, right?
That's something you can't. Can you change? Could you not be an atheist?
No,
Could you, like right now, like, could you wake up tomorrow and be a Christian?
no.
You can't. It's something you can't change. about
Okay,
yourself. Atheist.
okay.
Well,
What about it?
Anytime there's a sense of pride attached to that, that's your identity, or trans, or gay.
Right.
Or
Well, okay,
cis,
okay.
or-
It's what you identify as. Okay.
Right, but to attach pride to it and say this is me and it's all.
It's not gonna
this-
work.
I'm just trying to clarify what it means because I don't know what
To
that
be
means.
such a part of this, I'm going to be a part of this. Let's say I'm trans. I'm going to be part of the trans culture, which there is something to be said for that because they are.
Well, you
persecuted.
are one of the most like proud to be military white male that I've ever
But
met.
I'm not proud to be white.
We'll be
One
I'm
of
not
the
proud to
most-
be male.
Wait,
I
are you
am
not
proud
proud
to
to
be
be
white.
white?
yeah,
Oh, wow.
I'm not proud to be white.
No,
I'm not proud of
Totally
it.
that
I'm happy
that I understand. That I understand.
Because I wasn't born into that. That's
That I
something I
understand.
made fucking happen myself.
That
You know.
that's an earn.
You know
That's
what words.
that's
We're not
earned.
supposed to talk about.
We're not
Right.
gonna talk about.
You know what I'm-
That's
Okay,
earned.
so what's the point you're
That's right.
making? Like, what is that? The SJW? Isn't that like a social justice warrior thing?
It's a pejorative.
What is that?
It's a derogatory
Because, but
term.
people self-identify as that.
Radical feminists, far left, Antifa.
But you were
Black
saying
Lives
identity.
Matter.
Wait, no, wait. You're putting everything in there.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
That's not.
What can get
That's
lumped in there.
not. That's not necessarily the case.
It's not
I
always.
mean, because straight up, because if you're arguing that case, you're telling me that you would be anti-MLK, you would be anti-MLX, Malcolm X, you would be anti all of those guys, and I don't believe that you're so anti-American, anti-civil rights that you would say that.
Some parts of MLK I disagree with, and I'm
That's
vehemently
But it doesn't
opposed
make
to
you
it.
anti.
No. So he just said I'm anti. He's supposing that I might be anti-MLK.
I know you're not. I know you're not. I know you're not.
I'm not an adulterer.
I know you're
I'm not
not.
a drug user.
But that,
Ooh, you went there. You went. Hey, I go there all the time.
okay, but
Yeah, I go there all the time. I do. I really do go. I do go all. I go all the time.
But it's funny. I'm glad you mentioned MLK because of all the people on the planet, it was him that said when he had a dream, what was his dream? That all people were judged on the basis of their character, not on the color of their skin. So he was an anti.
Yeah. Okay.
MLK was an anti-SJW.
My big question then is, if you're supposed to judge people based on the content of their character, why have we made race and sex and sexual preference the most important things about a person now?
Exactly.
okay.
Why are these now the most important things about a person? Aside from what choices they actually make in life.
Okay.
The Courtney and Alix show.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You still have
This has been so much on this, not even.
Okay, but you still haven't answered my
this is
question
supposed to
about
go
what
right.
that
This
means.
This has been.
Can I clarify
Yes.
just for me and for the audience? Like, what does that mean?
Yes.
SJW?
Oh, okay.
Because you're talking about identity politics. What does that mean?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, go for it.
I'm asking you.
Oh, well, what? Wait, I thought I just.
Because I don't. No, you asked me a series of questions about whether I am proud of something I can't control. Talking, and I don't know what your point was.
Your identity based on something you cannot control is something so inherent to you that you wear it on your sleeve, and that you judge. That's how you want to be. That's how you want others to judge you as or see you as.
Don't we all go into the world like that
No,
to a certain
I
extent?
don't think you should.
That you identify as a former military Marine, like you identify.
That is something I was not born into.
But you identify, yeah, but
that's a difference. That's a separate thing.
But
white, male, atheist, cisgender, heterosexual.
But you're talking
Can't
about
control it.
but you're talking
But
about
none of those-
eliminating
yeah, well, still
cultural
none of those-
identity. Like
But you see
cultural
the difference
identity
between that and being a Marine.
is something you can't control. You're born into a certain culture, but you can still have a cultural identity that gives you a certain perspective
And
that defines something about you, right? Right? Is that right?
Par for the course.
The military is just a different.
It's a different animal.
No, but I'm just saying.
Social justice is.
I'm saying that
everything should be
military is something that you are particularly wanting to be seen as, like you
I'm
have
proud of that. Yes.
just.
You have
But what I mean is
certain,
like a certain aspect
podcasts or
of
videos
me
that
is
follow.
atheism.
I still listen to-
That's an important issue to me, and
I'm
that's a
gonna-
big part of
I'm gonna
who I
let you listen.
am.
I'm
Is
gonna
what
let
I'm
you
saying. Being former
That's where
military
we
for
have some
you,
problems.
being a former
Being
military.
female should not be a big part of who you are.
I didn't say female. I said atheist.
Oh,
I said atheism is a big part of who I am. But for you, yeah, I know.
What he heard is
I know. I deal with them on that all the time.
and this
But-
is how we internalize stuff. right?
But I deal with that with him all the time.
I'm
About,
glad
like,
you're
he-
entertained.
He heard man hating. I heard inclusion, and we had to go back and watch it and see who was right.
hey, guess what? I can say Rhodes wrong.
I know, and
That's why I love
that's
this
what's
show.
great about
and we
Tim
can
is that he can be mistaken, but he will be
we can
corrected.
almost
I'm wrong.
end this show on that right there.
I love saying I'm wrong, and we can't start.
I don't think-
And I
I think we can
absolutely
just
love
change
the
the
fact that
subjects.
we're having this
But
conversation.
are you saying that I'm SJW because I don't want to say that?
I
I'm
really
wrong?
only said that just to kind of
Like-
put a line between us where it doesn't belong,
Okay.
which I
yeah,
did
why?
exactly what I'm saying not to do.
Okay, but
Put us in little boxes.
Divisive.
I'm just
I
not.
just divided
I'm
us
just
up.
personally not clear on what that definition is in general. I don't know what that means.
Do you think women get paid less money for the same
is
job
that a
working the same
definition?
hours?
Can you give me a definition?
Just answer this real quick.
But you gave
do you
me an
think
example before, and you still didn't explain what that meant. You
You
just gave an example.
Okay, just a definition. What do you think an SJW is?
Just a definition.
Okay, yes. What's the next?
There's social justice and there's identity justice.
Just give me a
Whoa, wait.
I'm
What's
sorry,
the difference?
not identity,
What's the
individual
difference?
justice.
So the definition
Social
of
justice and individual justice.
okay.
Social justice is justice that's applied to an entire group. Individual justice is justice that is applied to each individual based on their own actions.
Mm-hmm.
where there's nothing taken into account, skin color, what kind of plumbing you got in your pants.
Do you
think
that exists?
But I think that's creating a false equivalent.
I know, but do you believe that exists? Do you believe that exists? Okay.
Hell no.
Okay.
Okay, then where is your disagreement with SJW?
Treating all the group as a group thing, like get out of line. You're not part of our. You're either with us or against us.
Okay,
atheism plus.
Okay, so for I think the fourth
You're
time.
with us or against us.
For I think the fourth time.
No comment.
Perfect ingredient.
No comment.
Come on.
No
Jim?
comment.
Come on.
No comment. No comment.
Fourth time I'm asking
Yes.
this. Can you define for me, just because I really honestly don't know what it means? Just define it. Give me a definition. As if you were writing it for the dictionary.
A pejorative term for an individual who repeatedly and vehemently engages in arguments on social justice on the internet, often in a shallow or not well thought out way, for the purposes of raising their own personal reputation as social justice warrior. SJW does not necessarily strongly believe in all that they say or even care about the groups that they're fighting on behalf of. They typically repeat points from whoever's the most popular blogger or commenter at the moment, hoping that they will get SJ points to become popular in return.
Okay.
When did that happen?
Okay, but
they are very sure to adopt stances that are correct.
Where is that from?
On their social
dictionary.
When did that happen?
But SJW, but they self-identify as that, so they must have a different definition.
SJWs don't call themselves that.
Yeah, they do.
We don't call ourselves new atheists.
No, they do. They say
now
I'm
we do. Yes,
I'm a social justice warrior for this. That's absolutely what I hear.
Because once upon a time, this is pre-2014. This is 2014-ish, where we did actually call ourselves, several social justice advocates or justice advocates.
That's what I like to say.
Right? Actually call themselves social justice advocates or social justice warriors, but this was a long time ago.
Well, sometimes people adopt a pejorative. How many N-words do you hear in rap music nowadays? You take a pejorative and you repurpose it. Yeah.
It's false equivalent.
How is that not? You take a pejorative and you turn it into something that favors your movement. What are we can agree that
they're not saying like SJ. They're not saying like
SJW is a pejorative word. It's a pejorative term. Yeah.
Right, but they're not.
You need like
it
3
either, though.
times.
They're not really. They're using the same exact word. They're not like going instead of
This is
One last question.
Jim, wait. Okay, maybe we should just move on.
Really?
Do you think you just proved that wrong? Like, is that what you think just happened?
When I called you an SJW, I don't really mean that.
No, I'm not saying about me.
I was talking out the side of my neck. When
Do
I
you
said that.
do you believe that Martin Luther King was an
SJW.
I think
Why not?
Based on just that speech in and of itself, I think it's
No.
probably anti-social justice. Judge a man by content of his character, not the color of his skin.
Oh, this is such a different. Oh my God, we need to continue this conversation. Really? This is a good conversation to have.
You're gonna beat my ass.
I'm just gonna do it right now. I'm good.
But you know what?
Everybody, this is Caesar.
Yeah.
Okay, now can you put in more of that speech that you think is relevant to that conversation?
There is.
Oh,
told you.
He's not gonna be quiet.
No.
What if you hold him?
Yeah.
I bet if Dad holds him.
This is TJ's.
My four-legged kid.
Mm-hmm. What's his name?
Caesar.
Caesar. Okay.
We have one more question.
Everything he looks at.
Oh, Kevin.
What kind of music do you like to listen to?
Do I like to listen? Yeah. I love jazz. I love jazz.
Classical or free? What's that?
Both. I love fusion. I love fusion. I love fusion. I love fusion jazz. I will do every kind of jazz that there is out there, just flat out.
Do you play an instrument?
I grew up playing the piano.
Strings.
Nice.
Yeah.
Strings.
Yeah.
Strings.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
I was 3 years old when I actually started. I was three when I started. And I think the very first one was the arabesque, but I don't remember which arabesque it was, but
Yeah.
but you actually enjoyed it.
I love the piano. I love the piano.
I think that's important.
My daughters now love the piano as well,
That's awesome.
that's been an absolutely amazing. It's been amazing to actually watch them really fall in love with music the way I have, or I had been. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have any plugs? Anything you want to?
No,
where are you going next?
It's the end of the year. It's the end of the year.
You have no upcoming.
It's the end of the year. Black Nonbelievers convention that's coming up in about 30
That's
days
in the
or so.
notes below already.
Yeah, 30 days or so. And then it's just hanging out with people. And the next year is going to be interesting. I think David Silverman.
Metroplex Atheist on December 16th is having a solstice party. If you're near the Fort Worth Botanical Gardens,
do that. Oh my God, I love it.
And there's an after party at the Radisson nearby.
If you are a humanist, do that. Just flat out, just do it. Forget about race. Forget about class. Forget about everything else. Remember that we are humans, and we enjoy each other.
Yeah.
So come hang out with Alix Jules, who definitely will not ask you why you hate Black people.
Except you.
Except
you. Except you.
I think. I mean, we definitely have a lot more to get to. Like, if
Yeah,
you're here,
We didn't even talk about my deep ancestry from Eastern Africa.
Oh, so why do you hate Black people is the question. No, that's my point. That's my point.
Wait, let me show you.
Even if as a Black person, why do you hate Black people?
We all came from Tanzania, so how can you tell anyone you hate Black people?
But that doesn't
We're
mean you have
all
the
Black.
same cultural
And I know on that
experience.
podcast,
That's
I've done
a
some
very,
research on other
very.
places too.
It's a very, very interesting topic.
Yes,
yes. Go ahead.
You did eschew it. You did dismiss it once on a podcast just recently.
Which one?
The trans female, the trans female, and the.
I know you're talking about.
Which one?
Sent to us.
Oh my God!
Oh, it was the inciting incident number 112. Inciting incident. I don't know the lady's name, but you said something about I hate it when someone says, "Yeah, well, black, white, it doesn't really matter. We're all the same race," and you kind of like poo-pooed it. You just shoot it.
That's gonna be interesting.
See, that's where we can pick back.
See.
Anyone else? Safe ground.
But it's almost not.
You want to
Is that
promote
your mom?
anything?
Are you serious?
Marissa Alexa McCool.
I know
That's
that
it.
one. I know that one.
Yeah, I listen.
Oh, you listened to it too?
Yeah.
Has Courtney
That's a
seen
good one.
that?
That no, she hasn't. She hasn't.
All right, guys.
She hasn't.
You should.
Take care. See you next time.
Bye.